Chapter 581. Watcher Underwater also realized that Xuanzhen's group was more difficult to deal with than expected. At this time, he had mobilized almost everyone to surround them in the forest. The Unity Alliance had a total of nearly 2,000 people. At this time, there were also more than 1,000 online. Together with Berserk Sky Law's players, there were more than 6,000 people. What kind of concept was 6,000 people? Spreading out their formation, the entire leveling area from Iron Rock Castle to Thunderstorm City was filled with people from the two major guilds. Even they themselves didn't think that they would make such a big fuss to capture a mere 10 people. With so many people searching in a line, not to mention 10 people, even the small monsters in the monster area wouldn't be left alive after they were swept. Seeing so many people from Berserk Sky Law, Watcher Underwater's mood was much better. With so many people helping to deal with Xuanzhen's people definitely wouldn't be able to fight back. After all, in the face of absolute strength, all tactics were paper tigers. But at the same time, Watcher Underwater was still a little worried. Berserk Sky Law had mobilized everyone to capture Xuanzhen's people. Their goal was to get the secret letter in Xuanzhen's hands. That thing was made up by watching the fish in the water. If there was nothing, wouldn't they be exposed? With the tempers of Berserk Sky Law and the others, if they found out that they were being walked around like dogs, it would be terrible. Even with Nian Luyin, Unity Alliance would probably not be able to survive in Thunderstorm City. Thinking up to this point, Watcher Underwater couldn't help but break out in cold sweat. He bit his lips and thought about how to explain later. "Watcher boss, what are you doing? I didn't do it on purpose." Watching Fish Underwater was deep in thought when a sudden voice scared Watching Fish Underwater so much that he started spouting nonsense. What didn't you do on purpose?" Thunder God Berserk asked in confusion. "No, nothing." Watcher Underwater hurriedly said. "What's the matter, Thunder God boss?" Thunder God Berserk laughed. "Although the quest isn't ours, with so many people helping, we naturally can't help for nothing. Of course, after the quest is completed, the fee I will give you will definitely be satisfactory." Watcher Underwater said. "No, I don't want money." Thunder God said. "You and I both know that Xuanzhen's people are filthy rich. What they drop later, whoever picks it up gets it. How about it?" The fish in the water was stunned for a moment, then nodded and said, Of course. All right, then it's a deal." Thunder God Berserk smiled craftily. He ordered his subordinates to cooperate with the United Heart Alliance in the search. More than 6,000 people spread out and searched from the foot of the hill. Since they had been ambushed by Xuanzhen's men, this time, the two guilds not only searched the bushes and blind spots, they even checked the trees carefully. After a wave of searching, all the hidden creatures were found by everyone. However, even with so many people walking from the foot of the hill to the cliff, they still could not find the Xuanzhen people. "That's impossible. We've searched both the top and bottom of the tree. Even if they're stealthy, they'll still be found. Why isn't there any movement at all?" Watching Fish Underwater, who received the news from his subordinate, began to feel anxious. What was supposed to be a foolproof search turned out to be like this. Thunder God Berserk frowned and wondered, could it be that they ran away? That's even more impossible. Watching Fish Underwater said, 10 people is still a big target. We didn't see anything along the way. Could it be? Could it be what? Could it be that they went offline? Watching Fish Underwater suddenly shouted. To be able to hide so thoroughly, other than going offline, there was really no other reason. Offline. Yes, they must have gone offline. Thunder God Berserk heard this and instantly reacted, but then he became listless. What would we do if they went offline? Thunder God Berserk said helplessly. Even if there were a lot of people, if they weren't online, there was nothing they could do. They couldn't just go offline and PK in real life, right? Watching Fish Underwater hurriedly said, "Not good. Let's go back and defend. These guys are very cunning. If we search over, they'll definitely be online again. They might be running towards Thunderstorm City right now." It can't be. If they're not online, how do they know when we'll search over? Thunder God Berserk was confused by Watching Fish Underwater. Going offline meant cutting off all contact with the game. Now that this area had determined that there were no people from Xuanzhen, Going offline and knowing the movements of the enemies in the game was too fantastical. You don't understand those guys. Quickly give the order to go back and defend. Watching fish underwater said anxiously. Back then, watching fish underwater and the people from Xuanzhen were also friends for a period of time. They were clear about the abilities of these guys from Xuanzhen, especially Chun Xian's calculation and prediction ability. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was a divine strategist. If it weren't for the fact that these savages from Xuanzhen didn't know how to appreciate favors and refused to follow watching fish underwater would have won them over even if he didn't want Duge Ling's equipment. All right, quickly go back and defend. Thunder God Berserk gave the order doubtfully. Just as Thunder God Berserk gave the order to go back and defend, Wang Yu, Wu Ji, and the others all came online. Seeing the mess nearby, Wu Ji sneered. I knew they would do a large-scale search. They should have already noticed that we went offline and will definitely search back. Let's take the opportunity to run. Where to? To place one's pride asked. Iron Rock Castle. Wu Ji said. No way. You want to force your way in? Aren't you going back to the city? In Lao Air exclaimed. Iron Rock Castle was the lair of Sky Law Berserk. Now that the situation had developed to this point, wouldn't going to Iron Rock Castle be walking right into a trap? Under these circumstances, returning to Thunderstorm City was more like it. I think going to Iron Rock Castle should be the right choice. Wang Yu, who usually didn't give advice, suddenly said, I've been to this map before. It's not too big or too small. If we want to open up and search, they'll probably have to go all out. There shouldn't be many people in Iron Rock Castle right now. Hearing this, Wu Ji laughed. Old cow, I'm more and more optimistic about you. Not bad. Second brother, if you want to return to Thunderstorm City, then you must also want to see the fish in the water. Why don't we take advantage of the fact that their defense is weak and directly charge in? If we miss this opportunity, we can forget about going back in the future. But that's their guild encampment. Can we charge in? Inlao Air asked again. Iron Rock Castle was a stronghold between the two camps. The road to the Dark Camp passed through Iron Rock Castle. Without the permission of Sky Law Berserk, if they wanted to pass through, they could only forcefully attack the encampment. Iron Rock Castle was a legendary stronghold that even the Dark Camp couldn't break through. Even if there was no one guarding it, it was impossible to pass through before the people of Sky Law Berserk returned. Hee hee. Wu Ji chuckled and glanced at Wang Yu. Second bro, you don't know, right? A system's stronghold encampment like the Iron Rock Castle is different from a normal encampment. We can get through with Old Cow. Me? I'm not a member of Sky Law Berserk. Wang Yu was confused. Chapter 582. Although they were both guild encampments, there was a fundamental difference between a system stronghold like Iron Rock Castle and an encampment that players had conquered themselves. As the Iron Rock Fortress was a quest reward, it had a complete defense system. The walls of the Iron Rock Fortress's residence were already top tier, and there was no room for improvement. Meanwhile, the defense system of an ordinary guild's residence required players to continuously level up to its standard. Therefore, fortress encampments were naturally much stronger than ordinary encampments. Of course, in order to compensate for the balance between the two types of encampments, the two types of encampments were also guarded differently. For example, an ordinary guild residence had two defensive lines, the guild gate and the guild crystal. Only by breaking through these two defensive lines could the residence be destroyed. The fortress encampment was a famous battle fortress with many plots in the game's background. Naturally, it couldn't be destroyed. However, the fortress encampment's gate didn't have any durability. In other words, as long as a player opened the door from within Iron Rock Fortress, they could enter the fortress unscathed. This was also why Thunder God had not left a single one of his subordinates behind. After all, a large guild had close to 10,000 members. There were all sorts of birds in the sea, and there was a chance that someone might bribe them. It was safer to leave none of them behind. Since the two major guilds had gone all out to capture the players in the forest, there were no obstacles on the main road. Xuanzhen's team quickly arrived at the entrance of Iron Rock Castle. Apart from Wang Yu's trio who had been here before, everyone else couldn't help but sigh in amazement at the sight of this legendary battle fortress. The Iron Rock Fortress was built between two mountains and towered into the clouds, blocking off the path to the Dark faction. The black crystal rock on the walls of the fortress shone with a sturdy light. Not to mention the players attacking this fortress. Even strategic weapons like the siege chariots and magic crystal cannons would not be able to touch this fortress. Especially the height of the city walls. It was even more frightening. The walls of an ordinary basic guild residence were only 2 to 3 meters tall. Even if a basic guild residence developed to the rank of a main city, it would only be around 10 to 20 meters tall. Meanwhile, when looking up from the bottom to the top of Ironrock Castle's walls, it was impossible to see the top of the castle due to the clouds. However, a conservative estimate would place the castle at least 50 meters tall. It was double the height of the largest main city, Light City. As expected of the legendary fortress that kept the Dark Army at the other side of the mountain, it lived up to its reputation. Well, old cow, is there a problem? Seeing such a magnificent building, everyone's confidence in Wang Yu's ability to jump high was gone. Wang Yu's previous highest record was 30 meters, and this wall was 50 meters away. As for how far away it was, due to the limited field of vision, no one knew. A mage's featherfall could only fly up to a height of 25 meters. It was indeed difficult for a Grandmaster of Combat to jump up to that height. Let's give it a try. Wang Yu rubbed his palms together and looked up. If it was before he obtained Qinggong, Wang Yu would definitely have given up. Now that Wang Yu was equipped with Qinggong, not only did he have 4 stages of jumping, but he also had the ability to leap onto roofs and vault over walls. As long as he had enough Qinggong points, reaching this height shouldn't be a problem. Don't force yourself. I remember there's still a secret passage. Although I don't know if we can enter it, we can give it a try. Mingdu said. Wang Yu smiled and said, if I remember correctly, that secret passage is the entrance to the instance dungeon. Those 3 bosses aren't easy to deal with. Their people are not far away. Rather than taking the risk, it's better to let me try first. As he spoke, Wang Yu ran a few steps, pushed his staff against the ground, and leaped high. He stepped on the wall and rushed up. Bursting fist, flash, Wang Yu used a set of skills and instantly flew up to a height of 30 meters. Then Wang Yu clasped his hands on the wall and began to climb down. Yes, it was climbing, just like Spider-Man. The concept of leap onto roofs and vault over walls was completely different from Wang Yu's leap onto roofs and vault over walls. It should be called climb onto roofs and vault over walls. It wasn't cool at all. Although the posture was ugly, Wang Yu's climbing speed wasn't too slow. Soon, Wang Yu had climbed over a height of 50 meters. He passed through the clouds and saw the wall above the clouds. Damn, why is this broken wall so high? When Wang Yu saw the true height of Ironrock Castle, he couldn't help but curse. The wall below the clouds was only half the height. After passing through the clouds, there was still more than half the distance. Fortunately, he didn't use quadruple jump. Otherwise, with this distance, even if he had Qinggong, he probably wouldn't be able to jump up. Wang Yu crawled up the wall with all 4 limbs. When climbing, his Qinggong consumption was 4 times. Although Wang Yu's consumption was halved, his climbing speed couldn't be faster than his jumping speed. Soon, his Qinggong consumption was halved. As Wang Yu climbed, he calculated the distance to the top of the wall. When his Qinggong was less than 300 points, Wang Yu jumped up again. Quadruple jump. He jumped over 20 meters. He was still a few meters away from the top of the wall. At this time, Wang Yu's Qinggong had already reached 0. Wang Yu looked down from midair. It was over 100 meters high, and he didn't have any skills. If he fell, he would die. Ironrock Castle's wall was very sturdy. Weapons couldn't penetrate it. Even if he wanted to climb up with his 2 swords, he wouldn't be able to. At this time, Wang Yu's body began to sink. At this critical moment, Wang Yu took out the flying dragon rope from his bag and threw it up. The rope flew straight up, flipped over the wall, and was firmly stuck. Wang Yu's body tensed, and he stopped falling. Then, Wang Yu grabbed the rope and climbed up the wall. After climbing up the wall, Wang Yu secretly wiped the sweat off his forehead. Fortunately, his reaction was fast. Otherwise, he would have fallen to his death. Although the flying dragon rope didn't have any attributes, it was so useful as a rope. It seemed like this toy needed to be reforged in case of emergencies. At the same time, Wang Yu's message had exploded. It was from Wuji and the others. F***CK, you still haven't climbed up? Can't you find a switch to open the gate? Why aren't you saying anything? After scrolling to the end of the message, Wang Yu replied in the noisy channel, I just climbed up. This wall is at least 120 meters high. After Wang Yu sent this message, the Chuanjin channel instantly fell silent. After a long time, Wuji replied, You're not joking, right? 120 meters? The distance on the ground could be covered in a dozen or so seconds. If they were to climb up, it would be as high as a 40-story building. This number was obviously too shocking. It would be very difficult to defend a fortified city with a 40-story building's walls. But on the other hand, Iron Rock Castle was the most sturdy stronghold in the game. It was the pinnacle of technology and magic. Its defense system could be said to be perfect. To defend a city on a 100-meter-high wall, there should be a corresponding weapon system. Berserk Sky's luck was really, what kind of joke is this? I almost fell to my death. As Wang Yu replied, he opened the gate. Chapter 583. When the people of Chuanjin received the news, Thunder God had already led a group of people back to the entrance of Thunderstorm City. At the same time, Sky Wrath players also received the system news. Thunder God was dumbfounded when he received the news that Iron Rock Fortress had fallen. Thunder God had absolute confidence in the sturdy Iron Rock Fortress, which was why he had returned to defend Thunderstorm City. Who would have thought that things would develop so unexpectedly? F***CK. Who's in the encampment? Thunder God had absolute confidence in the 120-meter wall of Iron Rock Fortress, so he did not think that someone had climbed over the wall. Instead, he suspected that there was a traitor among his subordinates. Berserk Wrath was the main guild stationed in Iron Rock Castle. A level 2 guild only had 300 members in total. Only these 300 members had the right to freely enter and exit Iron Rock Castle. At the same time, these 300 members were, without exception, Berserk Thunder God's most trusted subordinates. If a traitor were to appear among these 300 members, then Berserk Thunder God would lose more than just the guild residents. There's no one in the encampment. Thunder God replied. The 300 people were all here. It was impossible for anyone to open the gate for Chuanjin. F***CK. Could be a system bug? Stop talking nonsense. Hurry up and return to the encampment. Thunder God anxiously shouted. After Iron Rock Fortress fell, as long as the souls of the 3 bosses were released, Iron Rock Fortress would have a new owner. At that time, not only would they lose their super encampment, but Sky Wrath would also have to face the punishment of being demoted. A level 2 guild was already unique, and a level 1 guild was even more unprecedented. When that time came, wouldn't they become a laughingstock? Sky Wrath would probably disappear because of the people's distraction. Seeing Thunder God Berserk leading his men to retreat so impatiently, Underwater Fish asked in surprise, Where is Boss Thunder God going? Aren't you going to block Chuanjin's people? F***CK. Chuanjin's people are already online, and they're not in Thunderstorm City. Thunder God said impatiently. Although the fall of Iron Rock Fortress wasn't Underwater Fish's doing, it was still Underwater Fish's doing. Even if Thunder God didn't want to cause trouble for Underwater Fish, he wasn't in a good mood. Oh, really? If they don't go to Thunderstorm City, where would they go? Underwater Fish Watcher asked in confusion. Everyone in the Thunderstorm City knew about the sturdiness of the Iron Rock Castle. No one would have thought that the people of the Chuanjin army would cut off the Berserk Sky Law's escape route. After all, it was a pipe dream for a mere 11 people to take down a fortress that even the Dark Army could not penetrate. They are at Iron Rock Castle. After saying this, Thunder God turned around and left. Seeing Fish in the water was also confused. Are those guys in Chuanjin crazy? What do we do now? Nian Luyun asked from the side. Since Chuanjin's people were not in Thunderstorm City, there was no point in returning to defend. Let's follow them and see what's going on. Seeing Chuanjin's unconventional actions, Underwater Watching Fish was also filled with curiosity. He wanted to find out what was going on, So after arranging for his subordinates to block the road at the entrance of Thunderstorm City, he brought Nian Luyun and a few core experts with him to follow them. After arriving at the Iron Rock Castle, Underwater Watching Fish's hair stood on end. The gate of the Iron Rock Castle was lowered, and the wide open gate seemed to be mocking everyone's ignorance. Nian Luyun muttered, "Could the Iron Rock Castle have been taken down by Chuanjin's people? Don't talk nonsense." Hearing this, Underwater Watching Fish's heart almost jumped out. The Iron Rock Castle was the fate of the Berserk Sky Law. This matter had started because of Underwater Watching Fish. If it was taken down now, it would be fine if the people of Chuanjin could really drop an item that could level up the guild. If not, Thunder God Berserk would definitely vent his anger on the Alliance of One Heart. But this matter was originally Underwater Watching Fish's lie to Thunder God. How could it be revealed? Underwater Watching Fish was already starting to panic. He suddenly felt that he had made a bad move. He should not have involved the people of the Berserk Sky Law. But it was too late for regrets. Looking at the state of the Iron Rock Castle, even Nian Luyun could see that it had been taken down. How could this be fake? While Underwater Watching Fish was scaring himself outside the Iron Rock Castle, Thunder God had already led his people to the meeting hall where the souls were sealed. Thunder God Berserk let out a long sigh of relief when he saw that there were no people from Chuanjin in the meeting hall. Thank the heavens that those bastards didn't attack the meeting hall. Thunder God Berserk was filled with relief. At the same time, he ordered search. Find those bastards for me. The other side of the Iron Rock Castle's gate has also been opened. They might have run to the Undead Swamp, reported Red Heart, who was standing on a high vantage point. They ran away? Thunder God Berserk slammed his fist on the table and said angrily, "Leave some people to guard the encampment. Everyone else, continue chasing after them." Although the Iron Rock Castle had not been taken, Thunder God Berserk had been given quite a fright. His attitude towards Chuanjin had risen from quest to hatred. After all, the Iron Rock Castle was the encampment of Thunder God Berserk. Even if Chuanjin's people did not cause any damage this time, these people had come to the Iron Rock Castle twice to cause trouble. They had treated Thunder God Berserk's people as if they were nothing. It was an intolerable behavior. If he did not kill Chuanjin's people this time to establish his authority, Thunder God Berserk's prestige would probably be greatly reduced in the future. How would he be able to lead a large group of brothers in the future? In the game's customer service center, 9527 returned to the monitoring group after strolling around the outside. "Chairman Hao, those people are online and have taken down the Iron Rock Castle." Xiao Zhang, who had been staring at the screen, quickly reported the progress when he saw 9,527 return. "They're online, and they've even taken down the Iron Rock Castle?" 9527 ran over in surprise when he heard the report and said, "Cut the screen. Let me see." Xiao Zhang skillfully switched the screen back. 9527 did not dare to be negligent and watched carefully bit by bit. When he saw that the two major guilds had just started searching and Chuanjin had come online in time, the corner of his mouth could not help but twitch. It was a very risky behavior to be surrounded and then go offline. Chuanjin's people had come online at a very good time. A little earlier, they would have been discovered, and a little later, the two major guilds would have turned around. There was nothing special on the screen, but when he thought about how Chuanjin's people could predict the situation as if they were seeing it with their own eyes, even though they were offline, 9,527 could not help but feel terrified when he thought about it. If it were not for the fact that all the staff members of the monitoring group had signed a confidentiality agreement and had to bear legal responsibility, 9527 would have suspected that it was the staff members who were reminding them. Chapter 584. What's going on here? Xiao Zhang paused the video and asked 9527, puzzled. Did you see the rope in his hand? 9527 asked, pointing to the flying dragon rope in Wang Yu's hand. Well, what's wrong with that? Isn't this a climbing rope? Xiao Zhang was still confused. In the game, rope-type items were not rare. The advanced class of the thief class, was commonly known as the snitch. It was because of the thief's talent in climbing that climbing rope was one of the necessary sub-weapons for the snitch. Moreover, climbing ropes were things that could be bought in the grocery store. Any player who learned the climbing skill would play with it. It was normal for a master like Wang Yu to have such a thing. Xiao Zhang really did not know what was so strange about it. 9527 said, "It's a climbing rope, but his rope has no attributes. It can't be used for climbing at all." 9527 had carefully studied all of Wang Yu's information. Not to mention this piece of equipment, it was estimated that Wang Yu did not know him as well as 9527 did. Is that so? Xiao Zhang quickly selected Wang Yu and entered the information retrieval. Sure enough, the flying dragon rope was shown as a quest item without attributes. It could be used without attributes. Is it really a cheat? Xiao Zhang was also dumbfounded. He had never encountered such a supernatural event. I told you, this person is very strange. Quickly lock his account and check the data. 9527 coldly snorted and gave Xiao Zhang an order. However, Xiao Zhang's next words stunned 9527. There is no abnormality in the mainframe's calculation data. This is impossible, 9527 exclaimed. Even an item without attributes can be used. Such an obvious cheat can't be detected. There must be something wrong with the mainframe. This is impossible, Xiao Zhang said with a frown. All the data in the game was carefully run by the mainframe. If there was a problem, it would definitely involve multiple bugs. It was impossible for it to be only on one person. At this time, there should be a large-scale loophole in the system. Slow motion playback. 9527 calmed down and said faintly, "Okay." Xiao Zhang received the order and started to replay the scene of Wang Yu climbing up the wall with a rope in slow motion. 9527 sat next to him and carefully observed frame by frame. The expression on his face gradually turned into one of astonishment. How? How is this possible? 9527 pointed at Wang Yu on the screen and said in horror, "What's wrong, President Hao? Is it really the mainframe's fault?" Little Zhang panicked when he saw 9527 in this state. It would be a big deal if the mainframe made a mistake. After all, it was a holographic simulation game that was connected to the human brain waves. There was no guarantee that the game would be taken offline. "No, look at his hand," 9527 said hurriedly. Little Zhang replayed the scene again and also noticed Wang Yu's abnormality. Climbing was a technical skill. People in the current society definitely didn't have access to it. So, for tools like climbing ropes, the system would provide a lot of assistance. When a player wanted to climb, they just needed to aim at the target and raise their hand. However, Wang Yu didn't raise his hand, he swung it upwards. In other words, Wang Yu didn't use the system to correct it at all. Instead, he used his own wrist strength to swing it upwards. Everyone had heard of thieves who could walk on the cornice, but when they actually saw someone who could do it, they were absolutely shocked. Is there really such a *T kung fu in this world? 9527 said in a daze. "Keep an eye on this guy. Where is he now? *M in. I didn't expect there to be such a weirdo in the game." "Just arrived at the undead swamp," Little Zhang said. The people of Xuanzhen were a group of people with a strong sense of purpose. Even if they had taken down a super fortress like the Iron Rock Fort, they were only slightly surprised and went straight out of the city. At this time, they had already crossed the mountains and arrived at the territory of the Dark Faction. System notification. You have discovered the Undead Swamp. 5,000 EXP gained. This place belongs to the Dark Faction and is not a safe area. Please be prepared for battle at any time. As soon as they entered the Undead Swamp, everyone in Xuanzhen received this notification. As the border between the two factions, the Undead Swamp was also a natural stronghold. In the background story of the game, the Undead Swamp was a land of destruction. The monsters here were mostly undead monsters, such as zombies, skeletons, and necromancers. Not only did these undead monsters look disgusting, they also had thick skin and extremely high physical and magic resistance. Only holy magic could restrain them. Wuji was the only holy class in Xuanzhen. Even he did not dare to run around in such a dangerous environment. The terrain of the Undead Swamp was also different from Yu Huiqing's swamp. At least there were trees growing in Yuhuaching Swamp. However, the broken place in the undead swamp was endless and filled with black weeds that were half a meter tall. It further convinced the people of Chuanjin that this was the Sea of Death. Where should we go next? We won't get lost, right? To place one's pride said with lingering fear as he looked at the almost identical scenery around him. Wang Yu was furious. Kid, believe it or not, I'll feed you to the zombies if you keep talking. To place one's pride was so frightened that he quickly shrunk his head. Wuji took out a map and pointed at the red dots on the map. From information we found in the library, these places could all be Atlan ruins. This is the closest one to us. As he spoke, Wuji pointed at a place called Kuel Harbor. From the map, this place was especially close to where they were. What's this? Wang Yu asked, pointing at the yellow area next to Kuel Harbor. That's the Undead City. Wuji said, Undead City? F*CK. Why don't we go to other places to search? Chun Xiang asked Wuji. The Undead City was the main city of the Undead Swamp. At the same time, it was an area directly controlled by the second apostle, Undead Reaper. In terms of a number of players, the Undead City was not inferior to Thunderstorm City at all. In Thunderstorm City, everyone was from the same faction. As long as they did not cause trouble, no one would purposely target anyone due to PK points. However, this was the Dark faction. It was only natural for two factions to fight when they met. Not only would killing players from the opposite faction not increase their PK points, but they would also gain faction honor, additional EXP, and other special rewards. This was a killing encouraged by the system. At this time, if they were to wander around under the nose of the Undead City, it would be no different from going to their deaths. They had just escaped from the wolf's den, and now they were going to fall into the tiger's mouth? No, Wuji said. The other suspicious locations require us to pass through the Undead City. Only Kuel Harbor is on this side of the Undead City. More importantly, Kuel Harbor is the only harbor among these locations. Chapter 585. In the limited background information, Atlan was only briefly mentioned. However, there was no doubt that Atlan was a coastal city. As the only port in the Undead Swamp, Kuel was most likely the entrance to the Atlan ruins. Everyone had expended a lot of effort to reach this place. Naturally, they couldn't go around Kuel Port. Come, let's go to Kuel Port. Chun Xiang stopped talking about the Undead City and waved his hand to lead the way. At this moment, Wang Yu suddenly appeared in front of Chun Xiang and pressed him to the ground. At the same time, he shouted, "It's an ambush! Get down!" F*CK, Old Nyoyu. Chun Xiang was pressed down by Wang Yu and almost bit his tongue. Just as he was about to curse out loud, an arrow suddenly flew over Chun Xiang's head and disappeared into the bushes at the side. Chun Xiang's cold sweat immediately flowed down. Fatal Shot, a level 30 sharpshooter's ultimate skill. It had a 30% chance of fatal shot. Even a tank would lose half of its HP. Fortunately, Wang Yu had pressed Chun Xiang to the ground. Otherwise, even if Chun Xiang added points to his constitution and triggered a fatal shot with his cloth armor, he would not have survived. F*CK. Seeing this, the others all crouched on the ground. At the same time, several arrows flew past the grass. These arrows were all fatal shots. It seemed that the ambushers were all above level 30. Currently, those who could reach level 30 and above in the game were veterans who had entered the game during the open beta. With so many veterans in a party, it was clear that the ambushers were not easy to deal with. Wuji, what's going on? Everyone asked in confusion. Wuji was the one who led the way. With Wuji's intelligence, how did he end up in an ambush? F*CK. This is Undead City's level 40 monster area. I forgot about that. Wuji replied as he lay in the grass. Now that everyone's equipment and skills had improved, in order to obtain more experience and equipment, killing monsters above their level was the main method. The level 40 monster area was currently the most crowded place for first-tier players. Experts of this level were usually players from big guilds. Big guilds didn't have any other skills, but they worked tirelessly on farming monsters. Chuanjin's men were so conspicuous, it would be strange if they were not beaten up. He even dodged a fatal shot. Looks like he's an expert. At this time, in the bushes far away from Qiuanjin, an archer wearing black leather armor and a black longbow on his back exclaimed in astonishment. "Fisk, old hay, you're the one who missed, aren't you?" A few people beside him mocked. The reason why Fatal Shot was so lethal was because of the skill's extremely fast trajectory. At the current stage of the game, unless players had exceptional foresight, they would not be able to dodge the attack once it was aimed at them. Chun Xiang was ambushed. In this situation, it was impossible for him to have the awareness to predict. The reason he was able to dodge, it was most likely because he didn't aim well. "What a joke," Old Hayes said. "When have you ever seen us deceive? The opponent is definitely an expert, and a very high one at that. Most of Undead City's experts are here. We've never seen those people before." The person beside him continued to mock him. "You've only seen a few experts. The opponent isn't simple." At this time, a person called Lantern Watching Arrows spoke in the channel. "Captain, do you know them?" "I don't know them, but the few people on our side also miss their arrows," Lantern Watching Arrows replied. Everyone was silent. It seemed like there was more than one person who blamed the Earth's lack of gravity for not being able to shit. "Stop talking nonsense. Keep a close eye on them and don't let them show themselves. These guys are most likely from Thunderstorm City," Lantern Watching Arrows continued. Everyone in Undead City basically knew each other. Qiuanjin's men were all unfamiliar faces. This was also the border between Thunderstorm City and Undead City, so Lantern Watching Arrows wasn't a random guess. Hearing this, everyone hurriedly hid and continued to watch the location where Qiuanjin's men were hiding. On Qiuanjin's side, Wuji had already crawled to Wang Yu's side and asked Wang Yu, "Old cow, where are they?" Qiuanjin's men all knew that Wang Yu had the ability to sense ambushes. If not for Wang Yu's timely reminder, they would have already failed miserably. "I don't know. They aren't aiming at me right now. I can't feel them," Wang Yu said truthfully. "So it's like that." Wuji nodded thoughtfully. "How about I stand up and be the bait?" As he spoke, Wang Yu was about to stand up. Wuji hurriedly held down Wang Yu and said, "Don't. We don't know how many people are lying in ambush here. Moreover, most of them have fatal shots. There's no need to take the risk. Are we just going to crawl forward like this?" Wang Yu said unwillingly. There were no trees in the undead swamp. There were only bushes for cover, and the bushes were no more than a meter tall. For a big guy like Wang Yu, half of his head could be seen when he crouched down. If he wanted to be safe, he could only crawl on the ground like Wuji. That was too King frustrating. He watch me." At this time, Mingdu suddenly laughed. He took out a hat from his bag and put it on his magic staff. Then he raised it up. Someone's head. "Attack!" Not far away, Blackie and the others saw a head poke out. They all raised their bows and knocked arrows. 7 or 8 arrows hit Mingdu's hat almost at the same time. Wuji looked at the direction of the arrows, then pointed at where Blackie and the others were lying in ambush. He ordered, "Dao Xuan, old fish, 6 o'clock." Dao Xue and Dao Xue went invisible and quickly moved toward where Blackie and the others were lying in ambush. Blackie was puzzled. Who stole the kill? Whether it was the enemy camp or their own camp, killing a target would give PK points or special rewards. But after a round of shooting, there wasn't even a single PK. This was too strange. "It wasn't me." "It wasn't me either. I didn't hit," everyone replied. This isn't right." Just as Blackie was struggling, a dagger stabbed into his waist. He was instantly killed. At the same time, Dao Xue's figure appeared. "Not good, there's an assassin." An archer's close combat ability was practically zero. When facing an enemy head-on, pulling away was the most important thing. When the archers saw Ming, Jian, Dao Xue, they cried out in fear and turned to run. In the end, they had only run a few steps when the person running at the very front was suddenly stabbed in the stomach by Baiming Yoyu, who had suddenly appeared in front of them. Baiming Yoyu specialized in critical hits, and archers were famous for being fragile. When facing an enemy head-on, the archer didn't even make a sound before dying. F*CK. We're surrounded. Quick, scatter. The archers weren't weak either. Seeing that there were assassins in front and behind them, they stood back to back without hesitation. They raised their crossbows and released multi-arrow. A circle of arrows shot out 360 degrees without any blind spots. Dao Xue and Bai Mingyu both laid on the ground at the same time, dodging the arrows and going invisible again. Chapter 586. Assassins were a class that naturally countered archers. Moreover, this was a melee battle, so archers could not display their advantage at all. In just a few moves, the remaining archers were reduced to white light by Ming Jian and Dao Xue. Old Black, what's going on over there? At this moment, Lantern Burning, who was not far away, also heard the commotion and asked in the channel. After reviving, Old Black hurriedly replied, "Quickly hide yourselves. We weren't attacking players just now. Instead, we exposed our position and the ambush point has been occupied. F*CK. I don't see anyone going over." Lantern Burning and the others kept their eyes on the bushes that Xuanjin was hiding in. They did not see anyone rushing over. It's assassins. Both of them are experts. Old Sable said that only players around level 35 could survive in this leveling area. They were experts at the top of the leaderboards in the game. Old Sable's team of 6 had been wiped out in just 2 rounds. It was clear that these 2 assassins were extraordinary. Assassins. Lantern Burning felt a little regretful. Due to the lack of anti-stealth skills, assassins had always been the most difficult class to deal with in Rebirth. More than half of Lantern Burning's team were archers. There was no class that countered assassins. Originally, Lantern Burning only wanted to deal with the people who had barged into their training area, who knew that they were facing an iron plate. Not only were there assassins, but there were also 2 experts. It seemed like they were in trouble. If they were both players from the Dark faction, it would be fine if they were killed once. However, if they were from the Light faction, they would be in trouble. They had hunted many Thunderstorm City players in the past, so they were very familiar with the rules of PvP between factions. If they were killed by someone from the opposite faction, not only would the drop rate and EXP be doubled, their faction reputation would also be deducted. The rewards for killing were generous, but the penalty for being killed was also very painful. Thinking of this, Lantern Burning gritted his teeth and shouted from the bushes, "Brother on the other side, what happened just now was purely a misunderstanding. We didn't do it on purpose." Misunderstanding? Are you King kidding me? Hearing this, the people from Xuanjin could not help but laugh. Putting aside the fact that they were from opposing factions, just the fact that they fired without saying anything showed that they had the intention to kill. Now that they were at a disadvantage, they said it was a misunderstanding. Wasn't that bullshit? Trying to play this trick in front of Xuanjin with this little bit of skill, isn't this showing off in front of an expert? We are players from the Golden Spear Iron Horse Guild. This is our guild's leveling area. Brother, you guys are from the other side of the mountain, right? Looking On knew that his words wouldn't be able to fool the Xuanjin players, so he hurriedly brought up his guild. What he meant was, "This is my territory. It is only right and proper for me to attack you. Furthermore, you are from the Light faction. You better think twice before you cause trouble in the Dark faction. Golden Spears and Armor Horses? Is it a guild from World of War Horses?" Wuji asked. Golden Spear Iron Horse was an old ID in the game circle. Even though it wasn't some super big guild, the boss, Warp Horse, still had a bit of fame. Hardcore players like Wuji had naturally heard of it. I didn't expect this guy to be doing so well in Rebirth. He could even draw a level 40 training area as his territory. Yes. Do you know our boss? Looking On followed Wuji's words. Wuji replied, "Yes, we are old friends. We are players from Heavenly Punishment Berserk. We are here to look for a few people. We don't want to cause trouble. I hope you can understand." "I understand, of course I understand. If there is nothing else, we will leave now." Looking On quickly said, it would be best if they could resolve this peacefully. This was the result he wanted. "Yes, you can leave," Wuji replied calmly. At the same time, Mingdu took out his staff and started chanting a spell. Everyone in Xuanjin knew each other. These guys didn't have any friends. If Golden Spear Iron Horse was really Wuji's friend, Wuji definitely wouldn't pretend to be Heavenly Punishment Berserk. Now that he was pretending to be Heavenly Punishment Berserk, the hidden meaning was obvious. Looking On wasn't stupid. If Wuji said his name, Looking On would definitely leave without a doubt. However, Wuji didn't even say his name. Of course, Looking On wouldn't believe him completely. Little Shadow, try it out. Looking On said to the player beside him. The archer called Xiaoing took out an arrow and imitated Mingdu. He took out a hat and placed it on the arrow before raising it up. Over there, just as Little Shadow's hat was raised, a shout was heard. Then, a wave of magic engulfed Looking On's group. Aha, for people. A certain amount of experience. 8 faction honor points. PK points reduced by 40. After killing Looking On's group, Mingdu happily showed off. Next time we meet, let me kill a few too. Chun Xiang said enviously. When they were in Thunderstorm City, Chuanjin's group was full of PK points, especially Mingdu and Chun Xiang. Their PK points were already in the 3 digits. With their PK points, they probably wouldn't dare to return to the city unless they wandered outside for half a month. Now that he saw that killing players from the opposing faction could reduce his PK points, Chun Xiang was so excited that his mouth almost reached his ears. Don't celebrate too early. Look behind you. At this moment, famous sword Dao Shui, who was hiding at the ambush point, coldly sent a message. Everyone immediately turned around when they received the message. They saw a large group of people gathered at the entrance of the 2 factions. Leading them were Thunder God Berserk and Underwater Fish. F*CK. Heavenly Punishment Berserk is like a ghost that won't go away. Did I offend him? To place one's pride, said unhappily. It would have been fine if Guan Yu had only chased after them. After all, the people from the Quanjun sect had an old grudge against Guan Yu. After all, Guan Yu had stolen Guan Yu's items. Guan Yu had enough reason to fight to the death with the people from the Quanjun sect. However, Chuanjin had no grudge with Heavenly Punishment Berserk. Even if they killed Heavenly Punishment Berserk's people, they were the ones who chased after them first. They chased them all the way from the light faction to the dark faction. What kind of grudge did they have? Wuji said, just look at Thunder God Berserk's stupid face. He must have been tricked by Underwater Fish. Then I'll go over and explain it to him. Wang Yu was a little annoyed that he was being chased like a dog while doing a quest. Exquisite Dream smiled and said, will he listen if you explain it to him? If he doesn't listen, I'll explain it to him with my fists. I'll explain it to him until he listens. Following that, Wang Yu said seriously, none of them can catch up to me if I run on this terrain. F*CK. Look at what you're capable of. Exquisite Dream was disdainful. When the others heard that, they said, you should just believe it. Old Cow can even jump over a 120-meter wall. What else can't he do? Exquisite Dream was speechless. Haha, Old Cow, don't be rash. It's not the time to explain, Wuji said with a smile. Oh, what do you mean? Wang Yu asked, puzzled. The other party had already chased them all the way. It was not the time to explain. Was he supposed to explain after they were wiped out? Think about it. Thunder God Berserk must have been tricked by Underwater Fish. How do you think he will feel after knowing that he has been tricked? Wuji asked with a smile. He will definitely be angry. Let alone Thunder God Berserk, even a good-tempered person like Wang Yu would be unhappy if he was tricked. Yes, what if Sky Law Berserk suffers heavy losses before that? This will tear the fish in the water. Wang Yu was enlightened by Wuji's words and instantly understood what Wuji meant. Where are they now? The Dark Faction, near Undead City. Although Sky Law Berserk had suffered heavy losses in Thunderstorm City, Chuanjin only had a dozen or so people. Even a starving camel was bigger than a horse. How could a flea-like guild like Chuanjin cause heavy losses to Sky Law? Even if Thunder God Berserk knew the truth, he could only watch from the sidelines. However, things were different in the Undead Swamp. Sky Law Berserk was an outsider here, and they were from the opposing faction. Sky Law Berserk was a huge target. If they dared to loiter around Undead City, they would be courting death. If they told Thunder God Berserk the truth, when Sky Law Berserk suffered heavy losses, it would become a mortal enemy. It would be difficult for Underwater Fish to make a comeback. Another point was that people were far more likely to trust others when they were losing power than when they were in power. At this time, Thunder God Berserk had a strong army. He would definitely not listen to any of Wang Yu's explanations. When Thunder God Berserk was left with only a few people, Wang Yu would explain again and see if Thunder God Berserk would believe him. "You are so sinister." After understanding Wuji's words, Wang Yu sighed sincerely. If Wuji was plotting against someone else, Wang Yu would definitely hesitate. However, Wang Yu had absolutely no sympathy for a scumbag like Wuji who was watching the fish underwater. Hee, what do you mean by sinister? Didn't underwater fish say that this is called strategy? Wuji chuckled. By the time Lantern watching for arrows came to his senses, he had already appeared at the resurrection point. The group of Lantern watching for arrows looked at each other, their faces filled with indignation and anger. F***CK. They had clearly agreed to let them leave, yet they still had to launch a sneak attack. Where was the trust between humans? What was even more infuriating was that they had both raised their hats, but they had only shot a few arrows, and the other party had immediately used a spell. That was too shameless. F***CK. I won't be able to take this line down if I don't get my revenge. Lantern watching for arrows shouted angrily. Berserk Skylaw, right? How dare someone from the light faction come to the dark faction to behave so atrociously? It is obvious that he thinks that there is no one in the dark faction. It had to be said that Lantern watching for arrows was indeed a leader. It was clearly a feud between 4 people, but he had changed the topic to a feud between factions. That's right, the people from the light faction have come to our doorstep. They are too arrogant. Call for reinforcements. Let's go and kill them. The others were originally gloomy. Now that they had been fooled by Lantern watching for arrows, they were immediately filled with righteous indignation. They opened their friends list and guild channel and began calling for their friends. Although Undead City didn't have any major guilds, there were still many small guilds. Old Black's group of 6, including Candlelight's group of 4, came from 2 different guilds. After this commotion, many people in Undead City quickly learned that a group of light faction players had arrived in the Undead Swamp. Chapter 587. Berserk Heavenly Punishment's members quickly made arrangements. Berserk Thunder God was no fool. He knew that this was the territory of the Dark Faction, so he didn't dare be too arrogant. There was no need to show their attitude when a large group of several thousand people walked together. They were the epitome of arrogance. However, when faced with a small group like Xuanjin, which had high mobility and attack power, a small number of people was useless. Thus, under Watchful Fish's suggestion, they split up into groups of 500. Normally, large guilds would book a leveling area on this scale. Although it would still be conspicuous, it wouldn't be as provocative as a large group of 5,000 people. Seeing Berserk Heavenly Punishment's members spread out to search for them, Wuji took out a bunch of megaphones and distributed them to everyone. He then stood up, raised his right hand, and gave Berserk Heavenly Punishment the middle finger. "Over there, I see Xuanjin's people. There are not many people in the level 40 training area to begin with, and the people in this area had been cleared out by the Quanjin sect." Wuji was a white-robed cleric, and he was extremely eye-catching in this dark environment. His middle finger instantly attracted the attention of most people. It can't be an ambush, right? Berserk Thunderheart, who was walking at the front, was afraid of Xuanjin's ambush. At this moment, when he saw Wuji, he didn't rush forward. Instead, he seemed to have a lingering fear. "Ambush my ass," Berserk Thunderheart said. "We have so many people. Why should we be afraid of an ambush?" Berserk Thunderheart looked around, and when he saw his companions scattered across the mountains and plains, he felt a bit more confident. He ordered, "Warriors, go ahead and take a look." A few shield warriors stepped out of the formation and walked in Wuji's direction. Seeing people walking over, Wuji snapped his fingers and said, "Move according to plan. Gather at Kuel Port." Everyone from Xuanjin stood up, scattered, and ran in different directions. "Xuanjin's people are all here. Don't let them escape." Berserk Thunder God anxiously commanded when he saw Xuanjin's people split up to escape. If there were a few hundred people, it might be a bit difficult to deal with Xuanjin's method of splitting up. After all, Chuanjin's people were all skilled. If they couldn't beat them, they would have no problem running away. However, there were 6,000 people chasing Chuanjin. Even if a group of 500 people chased them, they would still be able to run. In the game, stats were the real deal. A professional expert could easily take on 10 enemies, but it was impossible to take on over 100 enemies. Even martial artists like Wang Yu and Nian Luyin could only take on a few dozen enemies at most due to their stats. At this moment, Berserk Heavenly Punishment's team had 500 players. If they didn't chase after them, wouldn't they become the laughingstock of others? Following Berserk Thunder God's command, Berserk Thunder God's players split up into 11 groups and chased like wild dogs. Due to the influence of Thunderstorm City's culture, Berserk Thunder God's classes were extremely extreme. Warriors and mages made up more than 90% of the players, while the remaining 10% were thieves, priests, and archers. Out of these few classes, only thieves and archers could run fast. In order to take care of the group of short-legged players, the few thieves and archers didn't dare to run too far ahead. They were like wild dogs that had escaped their leashes, but the people they were chasing weren't rabbits, but a group of hungry wolves baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Charging forward alone was simply suicidal. In any case, Undead City was in front of them, the main city of the opposing faction. If Chuanjin's people dared to enter the city, not only would the guards chase after them, but the NPCs might also attack them from behind. Thus, in the eyes of Berserk Thunder God, running forward was practically a dead end. Unfortunately, Berserk Thunder God underestimated how shameless Chuanjin's people were. While Berserk Thunder God's people chased after them, Chuanjin's people ran all the way. Soon, the two groups entered the level 30 to 35 training area. At this stage of the game, this area had the most people. Although it wasn't the peak period, there were still countless Undead City players training in the Undead Swamp. As the number of players in the training area increased, Chuanjin's people changed into black clothes at the same time. They took out their megaphones and shouted as they ran. The Light Faction's players are coming from the other side of the mountain. Although the megaphones that Wuji had bought were the cheapest regional megaphones, the megaphones that were used one after another were quite powerful. For a moment, all the players in the training area were alarmed. As the border between the two factions, Undead City and Thunderstorm City often had conflicts, especially in the Undead Swamp. Players from Thunderstorm City would often come here to PK and farm honor. However, Thunderstorm City had Iron Rock Fort, so the players from Undead City could not pass through. Over time, the two main cities had a deep grudge against each other. Of course, the main source of the grudge was Undead City. Thus, in the Undead Swamp, no matter how much hatred there was between the various guilds, as long as they saw the players from Thunderstorm City step into the swamp, they would definitely be united against the Light Faction. There was no mistake. At this time, the players in the training area heard someone shouting that the players from the other side of the mountain were here to cause trouble. Everyone put down the monsters in their hands and stopped the players from Thunderstorm City. The brain was a good thing, but not everyone had it. In the Dark Faction, even the Berserk Thunder God had to hide his abilities. However, the players from Berserk Sky Law were used to being arrogant and despotic. At this time, they had forgotten where they were. When they saw someone blocking their way, they arrogantly said, "Berserk Sky Law is here to handle matters. If you don't want to die, scram." The name Berserk Sky Law was useful in Thunderstorm City, but it was useless in Undead City. On the contrary, the people of Undead City hated Berserk Sky Law to the bone. This was because Berserk Sky Law's Iron Rock Fort, which prevented the players from Undead City from entering Thunderstorm City, was guarded by Berserk Sky Law. As a stronghold, the players of Thunderstorm City had to pay a toll to enter and leave. Hence, Berserk Sky Law had the obligation to keep the players of Undead City out. Because of this, more than half of the resentment of the players of Undead City was directed towards Berserk Sky Law. When the players of Undead City heard Berserk Sky Law introduce themselves with such an arrogant attitude, the players of Undead City were instantly enraged. "Motherf asterisk her, I'm beating up your Berserk Sky Law. Don't you know where you're going to cause trouble?" The players of Undead City raised their weapons and attacked, causing the arrogant Berserk Sky Law to be dumbfounded. Fuck, you dare to fight back? Hurry up and get into formation. The players of Berserk Sky Law were very skilled in battle. After being attacked, they immediately got into battle formation. The specialty of Berserk Sky Law's shield formation was that it had high attack and high defense. It was unafraid of anyone. However, the players of Undead City were different. It was true that they had attacked first to gain the upper hand, but there weren't many experts in this area. Moreover, they didn't know each other. Their class configurations were also scattered. In front of Berserk Sky Law's perfect formation, they were just a motley crew. Chapter 588. Tui, Worthless Scum. After wiping out the Undead City players in their way, Berserk Heavenly Punishment's morale soared. The shadow of Chuanjin's defeat was swept away. Holy sh**t. What are you guys doing? At this moment, Underwater Watcher, Thunder God, and the others caught up to them. When they saw the scene before them, they immediately shouted anxiously. Black-skinned dog, dark faction player, was in our way, so we took care of him. Berserk Heavenly Thunder said smugly. Are you crazy? You, who was underwater, was so angry that his whole body was trembling. F***ck, a bunch of trash that couldn't do anything right. They dared to be as arrogant in the dark camp as they were in Thunderstorm City. Did they really think that the Berserk Tion Fa was invincible? What the hell are you talking about? You. Berserk Heavenly Thunder glared at Underwater Watcher. Just as he was about to curse, Nian Luyun glared back at him. Stop arguing. Berserk Heavenly Thunder hurriedly tried to smooth things over. He scolded Berserk Heavenly Thunder. Heavenly Thunder, why don't you use your brain? We're here to look for someone, not to cause trouble. How can you do this? Berserk Heavenly Thunder said disdainfully, they're just a bunch of nobodies. What's there to be afraid of? They started it. What do you know? Undead City has as many players as Thunderstorm City. Do you think we're going to massacre the entire city? Underwater Watcher already had a guilty conscience. When he saw Berserk Heavenly Thunder's actions, he was infuriated. Otherwise, he would not have dared to curse Berserk Heavenly Thunder in front of Berserk Heavenly Thunder. What kind of temper did Berserk Heavenly Thunder have? He even dared to chase after Wang Yu. Why would he be afraid of Underwater Watcher? If not for Nian Luyun glaring at him, Berserk Heavenly Thunder would have dragged Underwater Watcher to fight him. Seeing his subordinate being ridiculed by Underwater Watcher, Berserk Heavenly Thunder was somewhat displeased. After all, one had to look at the owner before beating a dog, not to mention his own brother. What do you think, Boss Fish? Berserk Heavenly Thunder asked as he stared at Underwater Watcher. Underwater Fish waved his hand and said, All right, why don't we head back first? What Wuji could think of, he could also think of the same thing. While Berserk Sky Law was not at a disadvantage, they could still salvage the situation if they went back now. If they really waited for Berserk Sky Law to suffer heavy casualties before going back, things would not be clear. Go back. Are you F***ing kidding me? Berserk Heavenly Thunder roared. Thousands of us have chased him all the way here, and you're telling me we're going back? Berserk Thunder God also frowned and said, That's right. We've come with such a large force. If we go back with our tails between our legs, we'll be laughed at. There's no other way, then. Our numbers are too conspicuous. We can only split up and search separately. Underwater Fish said helplessly. In Rebirth, other than the two sacred classes, the other classes were pretty much the same. Therefore, there was no effective way to differentiate between the classes. The players were spread out, and they were a much smaller target. This way, they wouldn't be attacked by Undead City's players. Berserk Thunder God rubbed his chin and thought for a moment. There was no better way than this, so he nodded and said, All right, we'll do as you say. Form groups of 10 and split up. Be careful not to make any noise when you see the players of Chuanjin. Wait until we're all here before we make our move. Don't be rash. Yes. Berserk Heavenly Thunder God replied as he turned his head and glared at Underwater Fish. Underwater Fish turned his head away and pretended not to see. At the same time, Undead City was in an uproar. Players everywhere were talking about white pigs, light faction players attacking. This was especially true for the players who had been killed by Berserk Heavenly Wrath. When they respawned, they began calling for their friends to take revenge. Inside Golden Spear and Iron Horse's office, Galloping World had already received the news. Originally, Galloping World thought that it was just a small group of players roaming about and killing people. Any random team could deal with it. There was no need to make a ruckus. However, when he heard the news from the guild, Galloping World's mind went blank. A few thousand players in the leveling area had been killed in a few rounds. This was clearly a large group of players. Lamp, didn't you say that there was only one group? How did they manage to cause such a ruckus? Galloping World asked Lantern Watching Arrows. Lantern Watching Arrows replied in confusion, I don't know. We saw a dozen or so players at first, but they were all killed by a wave of spells. Do you know who they are? I don't know. They said they were from Berserk Heavenly Wrath, Lantern Watching Arrows said. Opposing factions would only kill each other for EXP. Then they're definitely here. Galloping World said, the ones who killed people in the leveling area are from Berserk Heavenly Wrath. Damn it. Are those fellows really here to cause trouble? Drawing the Arrow Beyond said in disbelief. At this stage, guilds had yet to develop, not to mention attacking other factions. Even PvP between main cities was rare. Do you even need to ask? Of course it's them. These white pigs really think our dark faction is mud. Everyone, listen up. Return to the city. I want to meet these white pigs. It wasn't just the Golden Spears and Armor Horse. Most of the guilds in Undead City had given the order to return to the city. Almost all the players in Undead City returned to the city from the leveling area. Even the players in the Instance Dungeon returned to the city after receiving the order. A battle between factions wasn't just about the honor of a main city. If a main city was defeated by a guild from another main city, the players would at most be laughed at for being weak. However, when it came to factions, it wasn't as simple as losing face. There were rewards and punishments for battles between factions. If they won, they would receive a lot of honor and prize money. They might even be given the right to use the main city. If they lost, not only would they lose a lot of honor, they would also have to surrender their rights and pay compensation. It was very likely that Undead City would belong to the Light faction in the future. When that time came, the players of Undead City would truly become losers. Being a loser wasn't scary. What was scary was being the first loser to be recorded in the annals of history and punished by future generations. Although it was a game, it wasn't a good thing to be treated as a loser. Because of this, the players of Undead City who didn't belong to any guilds returned to the city to prepare for battle. Even Wuji and the people from the Quanjin sect did not realize that they had unintentionally caused such a huge commotion when they only wanted to borrow someone else's knife to kill someone else and dampen the might of the Berserk Sky punishment. At this time, Chuanjin had already met up at Kuel's Port. Kuel's Port was an abandoned port that had been occupied by a large number of low undead. It was a level 15 leveling area outside of Undead City. It was very close to Undead City and was also the only way to return to Undead City. At this time, Kuel's Port was filled with Undead City players returning to the city. What a thick murderous aura. What's going on? As soon as they entered Kuel's Port, Wang Yu sensed a different aura coming from the players of Undead City. On the way here, I saw Undead City players rushing back to the city. Is something big going to happen? Chun Xiang guessed. Something big? Could it be that the people we killed are coming after us? Mingdu had killed too many people. Hearing Chun Xiang's words, he couldn't help but feel a little guilty. Coming after us? Even so, they shouldn't be coming after us. Wuji rubbed his chin and said, if they're going after us, they should be going after Heavenly Wrath's players. They should be killing people in the leveling area. Mingdu's eyes glowed as he said, that's right. They've killed at least a few thousand people. Crap, a few thousand? Has the Berserk Thunder God lost his mind? Everyone's jaws hit the floor when they heard Mingdu's words. Although Chuanjin's original intention was to cause friction between Heavenly Wrath and Undead City's players, the Berserk Thunder God was no fool. At most, he would offend a few guilds. At the end of the day, The Berserk Thunder God would just have to pay a small price. Who would have thought that the Berserk Thunder God would slaughter thousands of players? Speaking of which, Old Lee, how did you know? I was hiding nearby, waiting to take advantage of the situation. When I saw their formation, I immediately ran away, Mingdu said. Turning tail and running as soon as something went wrong was Mingdu's style. TSK. It's not too late for Heavenly Wrath to scram now. Otherwise, if they think that they're massacring the entire city, they'll be wiped out. The instigator, Wuji, clicked his tongue and sighed. Schadenfreude was written all over his face. You really are a sinner. Everyone looked at Wuji with disdain. However, what Wuji said was right. A single guild dared to massacre the entire city. If they didn't run now, Heavenly Wrath would definitely be in trouble. Of course, to Chuanjin, Heavenly Wrath's punishment was exactly what they wanted. Now that they had scrammed, Chuanjin would be less harassed. However, Wang Yu said with a straight face, they've caused such a big trouble. Won't we be in trouble as well? As soon as Wang Yu said this, the smiles on the faces of Chuanjin's members froze. Heavenly Wrath had caused such a big trouble. The players of Undead City would definitely not let it go. If they really pursued the matter, Chuanjin and the others were also from the Light faction. When the time came, they would be caught in the crossfire. Don't worry, Wuji smiled and said, we only have a few people in a team. As long as we don't enter the city and provoke the NPCs, no one will be able to tell which faction we belong to. Wuji is right. Hearing this, everyone let out a long sigh of relief. However, before they could completely calm down, a system announcement appeared in the sky. System announcement. Thunderstorm City's Iron Rock Fortress garrison Heavenly Wrath has invaded the Undead Swamp on a large scale. Within a certain period of time, they have slaughtered over 4,000 Dark Faction players. They have been rewarded with the guild title Guardian of Light. Heavenly Wrath's heroic deeds will forever be recorded in history. The announcement was repeated 3 times. Not only were Wang Yu and the others dumbfounded, but Heavenly Wrath's members were also dumbfounded. They were not dumbfounded because of this system announcement. Instead, at the same time that they received the announcement, all non-Dark Faction players within the Undead Swamp received another system announcement. System announcement. Players from the Neutral Faction and Light Faction have joined forces to invade the Dark Faction. The total number of players has reached 5,000. The total number of players from all 3 factions has exceeded 4,000. Chapter 589. Frontline Invasion. Summoned by the Light God, cleanse the evil undead city and purify the world of evil. Mission objective. Do not get wiped out in 120 minutes. Notification. Death will exit the mission, unable to re-enter. Unable to return to the city during the mission period. Rewards for killing players from the opposing faction during the mission period will be doubled. If the mission fails, all participating guilds will have their levels reduced by 1. Guild level Berserk Divine Punishment of Iron Rock Fortress will have their levels reduced by 2. The players from the Dark Faction received the same notification. System notification. Players from the Neutral Faction and Light Faction have joined forces to invade the Dark Faction. The total number of players has reached 5,000. The total number of players from all 3 factions has exceeded 4,000. Battle Scenario Mission activated. Frontline Defense, Frontline Defense. The flames of war of the Light Faction have reached the land of freedom. Take up your weapons and protect our home. Mission objective. Kill all invaders within 120 minutes. Notification. Rewards for killing players from the opposing faction during the mission period will be doubled. If the mission fails, the main city of Undead City will have its levels reduced by 1. All guilds in Undead City will have their levels reduced by 1. Players from the faction. 5421 from the Light Faction, 1 from the Neutral Faction, 271544 from the Dark Faction after receiving the mission. 3 numbers appeared on everyone's screen, representing the number of people from the 3 factions. At the same time, the system marked everyone's heads to differentiate between the factions. The Dark Faction had a black flame, the Light Faction had a white cross, and the Neutral Faction had a green ring of thorns. Due to the lighting effect, people's heads looked green from afar. This made Wang Yu depressed, and he looked down on the designers with bad taste. F***CK, isn't this a scam? After receiving the system notification, the people from Chuanj embarked. F***CK, it was just as Wang Yu had said. The war between the two factions had dragged Chuanj into it. Chuanj had been playing the game for so long, and they had only destroyed and not built anything. This was the first time they had been dragged into a battle, and it was a forced one. They couldn't run even if they wanted to. It couldn't be helped. Usually, the factions were differentiated by the color of their clothes and their professions. The dark faction was mainly black, and no one would recognize them if they changed their clothes. Now, there was a cross on his head, and he couldn't hide it even if he wanted to. What was even more infuriating was that the F***King cross had overestimated itself, just like the god of light. It was emitting a white light arrogantly, and in this dark environment, it was as conspicuous as a light bulb. It's all Wuji's fault. He even got himself into this. Everyone looked at Wuji with disdain. TSK, Wuji said disdainfully. How would I know that the Berserk Divine Wrath would be so stupid as to start a war of aggression? You guys know that I hate aggression the most. Damn it, Berserk Sky Law. Everyone started cursing Berserk Sky Law. Although the Berserk Divine Wrath had been recorded in the annals of history and received the title of Guardian of the Light, it was useless. At this moment, they were even more panicked than the people of Chuanj. The entire guild of Chuanj only had a dozen or so people. There was no difference between level 2 and level 3. Even if they died in battle, they would only be able to return to the city for free. Berserk Sky Law, on the other hand, was pitiful. If they failed the quest, other guilds would lose 1 level, but he, the defender of Ironrock Castle, would lose 2 levels. Right now, Berserk Sky Law was a level 2 guild. Losing 2 levels meant that they were level 0. As soon as the word level 0 came out, Thunder God Berserk shivered. Damn it. If it really reached that step, Thunder God Berserk will become the biggest joke in the world. In the future, he will be the synonym for overestimating himself and Berserk Sky Law. It's over this time. Break up into 0, my ass. Thunder God Berserk pointed at the cross on his head and spat water at Underwater Fish. Underwater Fish didn't back down either. What the F***CK does this have to do with breaking up into 0? Isn't this all because of you, an idiot killing people? Shut the F***CK up. Thunder God Berserk Sky Law felt his balls ache when he heard the word 0. The two of them were still arguing, and Thunder God Berserk Sky Law's head was in chaos. Boss, what do we do now? Let's gather our brothers and charge, Thunder God Berserk Sky Law said. At this moment, Thunder God Berserk Sky Law was quite confident in Berserk Sky Law's shield formation. However, they were facing an army of 300,000 players. A measly 5,000 players was like a mantis trying to stop a chariot. In a war of this scale, the difference in numbers wasn't something that could be overcome by individual strength. Even if Berserk Sky Law's players could fight 10 players at a time, they could easily wipe them out with 10 times the number of players. Gather my ass. Do you think we have a chance at victory? What we can do now is stall for time, understand? Those with high IQs often had a sense of superiority. Underwater Fish couldn't bear to see Thunder God Berserk Sky Law's brainless command. Fuck you. Thunder God Berserk waved his staff and was about to strike Underwater Fish when he was pulled back by Thunder God Berserk Sky Law. Thunder, your temper is really bad. You still want to attack your own people at a time like this? What kind of F***king person is he? Once this is over, I'll fight him to the death. Berserk Heavenly Thunder spat out a mouthful of saliva at the fish in the water. Thunder God Berserk Sky Law helplessly said, Look, Boss Fish is right. Right now, the most important thing is to stall for time. Stall for 2 hours. There are so many people in the Dark Faction. How are we going to stall for time? Thunderheart, who had been silent all this time, asked. Underwater Fish said, Let them scatter in the direction of the Death Swamp. What about us? Thunder God Berserk Sky Law asked. Huel Port is in front of us. Let's find a place to hide, Underwater Fish said. Bullshit, Kuelport is right in front of Undead City. Aren't we just seeking death by going there? You idiot. It's dark under the light. Seeing that the two were about to start arguing again, Thunder, God Berserk Sky, Law hurriedly said, "All right, let's listen to Guild Leader Fish. Let's go to Kuelport. Thunder, don't cause trouble." Not everyone had a sense of honor in the faction. Originally, there were some players and guilds in Undead City who did not want to participate in the hunt for the white-skinned pig. However, when the system quest was announced, their attitude immediately changed. If they could not win this war, they would be punished for failing the quest. The main city's level would be reduced by 1, but the guild's level would be reduced by 1. The system was like forcing a duck onto a perch. Once the quest was announced, even those who stood aloof from worldly affairs were forced out. Even their offline friend were called to come online. The number of people in Undead City increased, and it was quickly filled to the brim. The gaming geeks did not have any talent for commanding. There was no one to command a battle of hundreds of thousands of people, and they did not have the time to choose a leader. When they saw that the main city was full, they swarmed out of the city, heading towards the Death Swamp. This was the benefit of having more people. With hundreds of thousands of people, each guild had more people than the Light faction. Moreover, the Dark faction's players did not leave the map even when they died. There was simply an endless stream of them. They had an absolute advantage, and the other faction would not be able to last more than 2 hours. Chapter 590. Undead City and Iron Rock Fort were similar geographically. They were both fortresses. The Undead City sat in the middle of the Undead Swamp, splitting the swamp into two. Players could not pass through the swamp's eastern and western sides. If players wished to reach the other side of the Undead Swamp, they would have to pass through the Undead City. From Undead City to Iron Rock Fort, the Undead Swamp covered a total of 40 leveling areas ranging from 10 to 50. The map was quite vast. Normally, Undead City's players had their own territory to grind in. They didn't lack resources, so there weren't many conflicts. Because of this, there were many small guilds in Undead City. Normally, if there were only a few guilds, the Berserk Heavenly Punishments players would scatter and flee. No one would be able to find them in such a large map. However, it was different this time. Under the system's encouragement, nearly all of Undead City's players had been mobilized. Nearly 300,000 players had spread out. Half of the Undead Swamp was obviously too big for them. Not to mention the 5,000 people of Tion FA. Even a fly wouldn't be able to hide after being searched by so many people. The Berserk Heavenly Punishments players were currently scattered. Their fighting strength would be greatly reduced if they left the formation. Faced with the vast sea of people fighting in the Undead City, they naturally had no desire to fight. Basically, they would run if they could, and if they couldn't, they would resist. Every second they could buy was a second. However, the Berserk Heavenly Punishment's resistance was futile. With such a massive difference in numbers, they couldn't stop the Berserk Heavenly Punishment players for even a second. Even so, the Berserk Heavenly Punishments team was too scattered. Moreover, the Berserk Heavenly Punishment consisted of elites from large guilds. Hundreds of thousands of Undead City's players had split up, and it took them nearly an hour to kill most of the Berserk Heavenly Punishments members. Meanwhile, the Undead City's players had paid a considerable price. However, with Undead City's large population, the player losses were secondary. More importantly, the Light faction players in the Undead Swamp had all been killed. According to the system count, the Light faction still had 50 members. Meanwhile, the Neutral faction had not suffered any casualties. Seeing that there was still an hour left, yet they still couldn't find the opposing faction's players, Undead City's players grew anxious. "Boss, we've already searched the Undead Swamp 3 times, right? Why do those fellows seem to have disappeared?" Watchful Arrow said gloomily. Undead City was powerless to do so. After all, there were more than 5,000 enemy forces in the beginning. They were a large target, and they could easily run into a group of Berserk Divine Punishment players. However, as the target grew smaller and smaller, it became more difficult to find them. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Although there were many people in the Undead City, they did not have a leader, so they all split up. Whoever found something would get it. This sort of undisciplined and organized search would easily give the enemy an opening. It's been a few times. Could it be that these guys are hiding somewhere? Even Galloping World was confused. There were so many players in the undead swamp. They had already searched the area multiple times. Even if these players could hide, they wouldn't go underground. Hide? Where'd he hide it? Are there any obstacles that are more than 2 meters tall? Lantern asked. The players who received the quest all had the symbol of their faction hanging above their heads. It was a full 2 meters tall. If they wanted to hide, they would have to find a place with a tall obstacle. However, the undead swamp was a flat terrain. There wasn't even a single tree. The grass on the ground was no taller than 1 meter. Even if the Berserk Divine Punishment players hid in the grass, they wouldn't be able to hide the symbol above their heads. Speaking of tall obstacles, there were some rocks outside of Arnrock Castle. However, the rocks there had already been searched by the Undead City players. There wasn't a single person to be seen. Galloping World thought for a moment before saying, apart from the rocks outside of Arnrock Castle, the only obstacles that are more than 2 meters tall are our Undead City. Undead City? That's even more impossible. The guards aren't vegetarians. Wait. Suddenly, Lantern paused for a moment before saying, Kuel Harbor seems to have buildings that are more than 2 meters tall. Kuel Harbor? Galloping World exclaimed. Didn't we come from there from the very beginning? Kuel Harbor was the only way from Undead City to the Undead Swamp. But we didn't even search that place. Lantern explained. Just now, everyone was in a rush to get to the Undead Swamp. No one paid attention to the little harbor at the entrance. Besides, didn't they always say on TV that the most dangerous place is the safest place? Lantern continued. You're right. Galloping World's eyes lit up. He immediately ordered in the guild channel. Go back. Go to Kuel Harbor. The rest of the people might be there. The Golden Spear and Iron Horse players also saw Lantern's words in the guild channel. Now that they received the order, they turned around and rushed back without hesitation. Kuel Harbor was the harbor of the Atlan civilization. It used to be a very developed port city. However, many years of war had ravaged it beyond recognition. It had even become the residence of low-level undead. However, there were still many obstacles in the harbor. For example, piles of junk and some uninhabited wooden houses were good hiding places. Xuanzhen's party was currently hiding in a small wooden house at the corner of the harbor. Wang Yu and To Place One's Pride were clearing the monsters at the entrance while Wu Ji was looking out the window. Speaking of which, are we really going to make it through just like that? Mingdu said with a tinge of hope after seeing that an hour had passed. Wu Ji said, make it through my asterisk SS. We still have more than 50 people here. If they can't find us at the Undead Swamp, they'll definitely come back. How long do you think we can last with hundreds of thousands of people searching this little harbor? Mingdu was speechless. The Undead Swamp was huge. It was not difficult for them to search every inch of the place. Kuel Harbor was called a harbor, but it was actually not much bigger than a dock. Not to mention hundreds of thousands of people. Even 1,000 or 800 people could turn this place upside down. Then what do we do now? Mingdu asked worriedly. If they were killed just like that, they would be directly resurrected in Thunderstorm City. It would be fine for the others, but Mingdu had hundreds of PK points on him. If he died, would he not be imprisoned forever? He could forget about coming out before the game server was shut down. We'll drag it out as long as we can. If we really can't do it, we'll just guard this place and clear your PK points first, Wu Ji said helplessly. There was no other way. The difference in numbers between the two sides was too big, and there were many restrictions. Under such circumstances, a confrontation could not be solved with strategy. The only thing they could do now was to clear their PK points and strive to minimize their losses. Someone's coming. Just as Wu Ji and Mingdu were talking, Wang Yu, who was standing at the door, suddenly heard footsteps approaching. Chapter 591. Everyone split up and search. Watchful Arrow commanded the players around him to search after arriving at the port. The Golden Spears and Armor Horse players received the order to search through the trash piles and houses. There are people here. The port was small, so it was easy to search. The golden spears and armored horse players didn't even take 2 steps before they found a group of people. It was the berserk divine punishment players. To be able to escape the first wave of search from hundreds of thousands of players meant that they had some ability. At this moment, only the vanguard of the golden spears and armored horse had reached the port. When the berserk divine punishment players saw that there weren't many golden spears and armor horse players, they immediately pulled back into formation and launched a counterattack. There were many archers in the golden spears and armored horse. Logically speaking, they were able to suppress mages. However, with the presence of shield warriors, the advantage of archers was negligible. The berserk divine punishment's shield warriors formed a formation at the front, blocking a wave of attacks. At the back, mages threw out chain lightning. After a wave of attacks, the golden spears and armored horse lost more than 20 archers. Retreat, pull away. Archers' advantage over mages was their range. Watchful Arrow, who had witnessed the berserk divine punishment's ferocious firepower, hurriedly ordered his subordinates to pull away. However, before they could get far, another wave of berserk divine punishment players appeared from the other side. Using the same tactic, the golden spears and armor horse lost more than 10 people. Not good. There's an ambush. Retreat from the port. At this moment, watching the arrows with the lantern also realized that these fishes that had escaped the net were not easy to deal with. He led his subordinates and turned to flee. At that moment, a bolt of lightning floated out from behind the container at the port entrance, cleanly sweeping away the remnants of the golden spears and armored horses. Following that, Thunder God and underwater fish walked out from behind the container. The remaining white pigs are at Port. Everyone come quickly. After being ambushed 3 times, Watchful Arrow was furious. After reviving, he gritted his teeth and bought a megaphone to shout into the main city channel. At this moment, the Undead City's army of hundreds of thousands had been searching the Undead Swamp for an hour. Even the most cultured of the soldiers were infuriated by this group of cowardly fellows. When they saw the announcement on the main city channel, they immediately rushed back like a swarm of bees. We can't stay at the port anymore. Let's retreat, Underwater Catcher said anxiously. Now that the target had been exposed, the port was definitely no longer safe. If they did not take the opportunity to leave now, they would be waiting to be beaten up. Everyone retreat. At Berserk Thunder God's command, the elite players ran out of the port without even picking up the equipment on the ground. In the end, Thunder God and Kagaya underestimated the sheer number of 270,000 players. Before they even left the port, the players from Undead City had already surrounded them in droves. These players were dressed in rags, and they didn't seem to have very high levels. Thinking about it, this area was a low-level leveling area. Those who only dared to loiter here were definitely only around level 10. In the face of a level 35 expert, noobs who hadn't even completed their class change quest were negligible. If they wanted to deal with the Berserk, Heavenly Punishment, and Unity Alliance's elite experts, they could only rely on numbers. Even so, numbers were still a tactic. If so many players couldn't even stand a single touch, Thunder God and the others had no choice but to retreat as they fought. Unfortunately, there were simply too many players in Undead City. Moreover, most of them were ranged classes. By the time Thunder God and the others had escaped their pursuers' line of sight, more than half of the 40-man team had died. Those who survived were all top-notch experts like Raging Thunderheart and Yin Luyan. Thunder God despaired when he saw more and more players gathering around the port. Moreover, the players' levels were also increasing. At this moment, Thunder God Berserk suddenly heard a very familiar voice in his ears. Take a roundabout route. The entrance to the house is at the back. Thunder God was stunned. Turning his head, he saw Wuji's head missing from the window. He immediately exclaimed, "Who are you?" Enough with the nonsense. Hurry up and come in. Don't tell me you don't dare. Wuji said impatiently. Crap, what are you talking about? Why wouldn't I dare? Since he was going to die anyway, Thunder God steeled his heart and said to the others, the door to the wooden house is at the back. Everyone, follow me into the house. Saying so, Thunder God led his team to the back of the wooden house. To place one's pride, Thunder God opened the door, and Thunder God led his team into the house. More than 30 people instantly filled the cabin. When they saw the people hiding in the cabin, Thunder God Berserker and the others were stunned. "Crap, why is it you? Crap, it's you guys!" Exclamations of surprise rose one after another. As the saying went, when enemies met, their eyes blazed with hatred. However, when one was pulled by one of their enemies, the feeling was complicated. "You, why are you helping us?" Thunder God asked incredulously. He had chased Xuanzhen's team like dogs. Xuanzhen had no reason to save him. Wuji raised his eyebrows and said, "We're all in the same faction. Do I need a reason to help you? Why don't you go outside and ask those black-skinned dogs?" "But we were chasing you just now." Thunder God felt a little embarrassed when he saw how generous Wuji was. Wang Yu laughed and said, "It's not a big deal. We didn't lose anything anyway. We even got quite a bit of benefits." "Not bad, not bad. It's all thanks to you guys that my stats are over 100. Mingdu deserved to be called the scumbag of scumbags. He even showed off his stats in front of others. After all of his equipment had been dropped by these people." Heavenly Punishment's members were angry and helpless when they heard this. Mingdu chuckled in the chat. "See that? I love seeing their expressions. You're such a scumbag." Everyone looked at Mingdu in disdain. "All right, stop messing around." Wuji cleared his throat and said, "I'm a little confused. Xuanzhen hasn't offended Heavenly Punishment, right? Why are you guys chasing after us?" As he spoke, Wuji glanced at Underwater Fish, who had shrunk into the crowd, not daring to let out a fart. "This," Thunder God said embarrassedly, "we received news that you guys are here to deliver a letter to the Dark Faction. If we intercept the letter, we can level up the guild." "Oh? Which bastard said that?" Wuji continued to look at the fish in the water. Underwater Fish's expression became more and more panicked when he heard this. "That bastard Underwater Fish said it." Nearby, Berserk Sky Thunder shouted as he pointed at Underwater Fish. Underwater Catfish glared hatefully at Berserk Thunder God. Then, he pretended to be calm and said to Berserk Thunder God, "Boss Thunder God, don't listen to this guy's nonsense. The Xuanzhen sect is nothing good." Exquisite Dream said eccentrically, "Oh, is that so? Our Xuanzhen never uses our emotions to cheat us of equipment. Not like you, a night of listening to the spring rain." Chapter 592. A Night of Listening to the Spring Rain. Hearing this, everyone's eyes fell on Fish under the water. Everyone who played the game, other than newbies like Wang Yu, had heard of this famous name. Everyone present was an expert, so naturally, they were even more familiar with this name. A person of the level of Thunder God Berserk had also heard of the gossip and scandals of the fish watching under the water, especially the ambiguous relationship between Xuanzhen and a night of listening to the spring rain, which was an undisclosed secret among the high-level players. Hearing Exquisite Dream's words, Thunder God Berserk asked Fish under the water gossiping, "Aya, is Dugaling really as beautiful as the rumors say?" Cough, cough. The Xuanzhen people coughed. Thunder God scratched his head awkwardly and said righteously, "I despise scum who cheat people of their equipment." At this moment, Fish under the water was still quibbling and hurriedly said, "Don't listen to his nonsense, Thunder God Berserk. Xuanzhen has always been shameless and lowly. They only helped us to make use of you. Think about it. There are hundreds of thousands of players outside. Do you think we can get out of this small, rundown house?" Fish under the water was indeed good at deceiving people. Thunder God Berserk was tricked by this guy, and he really did turn back. Fish under the water was right. The port wasn't big, and there were so many people outside. Seeing his team coming this way, it was only a matter of time before they found the house. Who knew if Xuanzhen really did have good intentions? In the world of the internet, who could trust who? What a joke. Wuji laughed coldly. How is that motley crew outside compared to Sky Law Berserk? Far from it. Thunder God Berserk said. This wasn't Thunder God Berserk boasting. Although Undead City had a large population, there were no major guilds, and it was like a plate of loose sand. Moreover, there was a fixed number of high-level players in every main city. Those who could join Sky Law Berserk were definitely elites. How was this place compared to the forest in Thunderstorm City? Relatively speaking, this place is easy to defend and hard to attack, Thunder God Berserk said again. Although Thunderstorm City's forest was suitable for hiding, it was vast. Once the number of people exceeded a certain number, unless one had the same concealment skills as Chuanjin, it would be extremely difficult to defend. This small wooden house only had a meter-wide door, and a shield warrior could block the entrance. This kind of terrain was definitely an excellent place to defend. Of course, the house was in ruins. With the system God Berserk's rules, the players wouldn't be able to defend it. In that kind of situation, even your Berserk Sky Law couldn't do anything to us, let alone this bunch of chickens and dogs. Wuji's voice was powerful and resonant, completely dispelling the doubts in Berserk Thunder God's heart. Then Wuji said, "If it's really a mission, ask him to share it." Yu. Underwater Watcher was rendered speechless by Wuji's words. He pointed at Wuji and said, "This is a solo quest. Boss Fish, a solo quest won't affect your performance, right?" When Thunder God saw Guan Yu's reaction, he was 80 to 90% convinced of Wuji's words. His gaze sharpened. At the same time, Sky Law's members all aimed their weapons at the members of Heart Alliance. It seemed as though they were ready to fight at any moment. After all, being cheated on was not something to be happy about. If you were cheated on by a girl, at least you would still have a beautiful memory. Poor Thunder God Berserk was tricked by a bunch of men and suffered such heavy losses. His entire army was almost wiped out. What was worse was that he was involved in a faction war. His guild was in danger of disbanding and losing Ironrock Castle at any time. All of this was because of Fish under the God Berserk. One could only imagine how angry Thunder God Berserk was. Upon seeing this, Flowing Cloud stepped forward and blocked Fish under the God Berserk and the 7 or 8 experts of Heart Alliance behind him, dividing the limited space into two. Thunder God Berserk, we haven't decided who's right and who's wrong yet. What you're doing isn't very good. Flowing Cloud crossed his arms and assumed a standard Bajiquan stance. God Berserk's players retreated in shock. They were all too familiar with Flowing Cloud's abilities. One of them could easily take on 10 players, not to mention a mage. Fighting a Grandmaster of Combat in such a small space was suicide. Thunder God Berserk bellowed, "Bullshit. What do you mean we haven't decided who's right and who's wrong? That's for sure. That bastard Fish under the God Berserk is using us as free labor to deal with an old enemy. Don't spout nonsense. I paid him." Fish under the God Berserk retorted. Brother Thunder, you're wrong. He's not doing this to deal with us. He's doing this for this." Wuji chuckled and gestured for Wang Yu to take out the Atlantis key. "What is this?" Thunder God Berserk asked Wang Yu in confusion. Wang Yu opened the item display. This time, it was the Heart Alliance's players' turn to be surprised. "The Atlantis key? Isn't this... Guild leader, didn't you say we failed the quest? Why are you King scamming your own brothers?" The Atlantis key was a large-scale guild quest. In order to complete this quest, almost everyone in Heart Alliance dropped a level. In the end, they still failed. However, the quest reward, the Atlantis key, appeared here. Although they didn't know the specifics, they knew that they had been used as cannon fodder by Fish under the God Berserk. In a game, stealing equipment was a common thing. However, as a guild leader, if you brought your brothers to steal other people's items, then that was called skill. If you scammed your own brothers and sent them to their deaths, then you secretly picked up the treasures, then that was not righteous. In the game, there were two things, fairness and loyalty. As a guild leader, Fish under the God Berserk's actions were unacceptable. "Bullshit, I don't recognize trash like this as a guild leader. Fuck him." The members of Heart Alliance were in chaos. They cursed and stood on Berserk Law's side. For a moment, only Flowing Cloud was left beside Fish under the God Berserk. "You even hid it from me?" Flowing Cloud looked at Fish under the God Berserk with extreme disappointment. "I always thought you were someone with great ambitions. I could tolerate you using me to get more fans, but you lied to us." Flowing Cloud, Don't listen to those despicable bastards' nonsense. Flowing Cloud was just a simple-minded person. Fish under the god Berserk thought he was an idiot and even tried to trick him. Oomph. Flowing Cloud coldly harumphed and broke through the door. Everyone was dumbfounded. Mindu made a fuss and said, "Ah, I didn't know that boss Fish liked this kind of thing. Your relationship isn't normal, right? No wonder you didn't want a beauty a few years ago." Fish under the god Berserk glared at Mingdu. Mingdu waved his staff. "What? You dare glare at me?" Wuji extended his hand and stopped Mingdu. He smiled and said, "Oldly, don't talk so much. Let them solve their own problems. We'll settle our debts with them in the future." As he spoke, Wuji glanced at Thunder God and the members of Heart Alliance. Chapter 593. Watchful Fish's enemy was not Xuanjin, but Berserk Light Wrath. Because of Watchful Fish, Berserk Light Wrath's forces were nearly annihilated. A large part of the reason why Watanabe Fish had been so fearless in the beginning was that with Watanabe Fish around, Thunder God wouldn't dare do anything to him. Now, his subordinates had turned on him. Berserk Light Wrath's members were hostile, and even Yin Luyun had run away. Watchful Fish had been completely isolated. Watchful Fish's eyes were filled with fear as he watched the players closing in on him. He stuck close to the wall. At this moment, a shout came from outside. "Quick, look! There's someone over there." Immediately after, the sound of arrows whizzing through the air could be heard. From the window, everyone saw Yin Luyun and Undead City's players fighting. Yin Luyun was not in a good mood. He attacked viciously, taking lives with every attack. Unfortunately, his opponents outnumbered him. After killing a dozen or so players, he was killed by a volley of arrows. Thunder God and the others trembled in fear as they watched Yin Luyun from inside the house. Surrounded by so many players, an ordinary person would not even be able to stand. Yet, Yin Luyun had still managed to kill a dozen or so players. His strength was simply shocking. At the same time, Thunder God and the others felt fortunate that they had not taken action. Otherwise, it was hard to say who would have survived. "There's a wooden house over there. Quick, search it." After Yin Luyun was killed, the shouts rang out again. "Crap, they're coming." Everyone was shocked when they heard the shouts. They could no longer be bothered with Watchful Fish. So be it. What's there to be afraid of? Xuanjin's members looked at Berserk Light Wrath's members with disdain. Then, they turned to look at Wang Yu. "Brother Niu, I'm counting on you," Chun Xiang said affectionately. "Even if I can't escape, I'll at least hold on for a little longer. At the very least, let me clear my PK points." Mingdu voiced his and Chun Xiang's thoughts. He was still young and a virgin. He did not want to spend the rest of his life in prison. "Uncle Niu, I believe you can escape." To place one's pride clenched his fists in encouragement. "Stop fooling around." Wang Yu pressed to place one's pride's face to the back. There were hundreds of thousands of people outside. It was easier said than done to escape. To place one's pride was just standing there. "What do you mean?" Thunder God asked in confusion. Looking at the expressions of Xuanjin's group, could it be that this guy had a nuclear weapon hidden on him? Wuji explained, "Now that they've surrounded us, the only thing we can do is to lure them away. Then we'll take the opportunity to sneak out of the port. Finally, we'll go around in circles with them in the undead swamp. As for whether or not we can hold out for the last hour, that will depend on our luck." "No, I understand what you mean, but can he do it?" Thunder God Berserk asked skeptically. Thunder God Berserk had never seen Wang Yu's abilities before, so he did not have a good understanding of Wang Yu. At this moment, seeing how Wuji and the others were praising Wang Yu, Thunder God Berserk could not help but feel that Wang Yu was not reliable. There were hundreds of thousands of people outside. Even someone as strong as Yin Luyun could not last more than a few rounds. What kind of ability did this guy have? "Ask your subordinates if he can do it or not," Wuji said with a smile. Berserk Thunder Heart and Berserk Thunder God whispered awkwardly. "This guy is Iron Ox. He's much stronger than Yin Luyun." "Hiss!" Berserk Thunder God took a deep breath and said in surprise, "You're Iron Ox? Sorry for not recognizing you." After Thunder God Berserk entered the room, he had been watching Wuji act cool. He did not notice that there was such a fierce person here. Nian Luyan had already made a quick comparison. This guy was even fiercer than Nian Luyan. Could he be the son of the game company's boss? You flatter me. Wang Yu nodded at Berserk Thunder God, then suddenly said, "They're here. Get out of the way." Wang Yu shouted. He rushed to the door, opened it, and ran out. At the same time, Wuji casually waved his hand and threw a small snake to the ground. The small snake circled around everyone, and the room became empty. Berserk Thunder God looked at his illusory body and asked in surprise, "Group invisibility, don't make a sound." Wuji glared at Berserk Thunder God, and Berserk Thunder God immediately shut up. At this time, the players outside the door shouted, "Someone's coming out. After him." Then, everyone followed behind Wang Yu. Wang Yu leaped into the air, dodging and blocking the countless attacks as he ran out of the port. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared into the sea of people. Crap! Crap! Seeing this scene, Berserk Thunder God's eyes nearly popped out of their sockets. In Berserk Thunder God's mind, Remembrance Cloud was practically the limit of a player. Even if Wang Yu was stronger than Remembrance Cloud, they should only be on par. However, that was not the case at all. In the face of this endless sea of people, Nian Luyan could only last for a few seconds at most, while Wang Yu was directly sent flying by the attack. Yes, he was sent flying. Thunder God Berserk did not believe that anyone could jump so high and so far. What do you think? This lord has jumped over your Iron Rock Castle's walls before, Mingdu said proudly when he saw Berserk Thunder God's appearance. You said that you jumped over the walls of Iron Rock Castle. Everyone was dumbfounded when they heard Mingdu's words. They knew better than anyone the height of Iron Rock Castle's walls. Not even birds could fly over the walls. It had always been Berserk Thunder God's most important line of defense. Now, they heard that someone had jumped over the walls. This was no different from a bolt from the blue. Berserk Thunder God, in particular, felt his hair stand on end. From then on, he gave up on any thoughts of making an enemy out of Chuanjin. Damn it! One should not be afraid of thieves stealing, but they should be afraid of thieves remembering. With such a ruthless person around, the guild residents might be robbed while the guards were asleep. He can't really escape, can he? Berserk Thunder God muttered. Wuji shook his head and said, I don't think so. There are too many people. We should lure them as far away as possible. Now that they're gone, let's get out of here. Huh? What's that? Berserk Thunder God suddenly asked as he pointed outside the window. Everyone looked out and saw a familiar figure. They could not help but say, Crap, big bro, why are you back? You're not Zhao Zilong. Just run away. You don't have to bring so many people with you. Run away my ass. Do you know how many people 270,000 people are? Wang Yu cursed as he ran towards the harbor. The undead city players behind him quickly turned back. At this moment, the words that everyone wanted to hear the most entered their ears. We didn't enter the house just now. Go and see if there's anyone else inside. Just as these words were spoken, the door to the house opened. An archer stretched his head out to look into the house. Everyone inside the house was so frightened that they did not even dare to breathe loudly, afraid that someone would hear them. Chapter 594 F***CK. Everyone in the room was in an uproar when they heard Fish Underwater's shouts. They had been so focused on the enemies outside that they had forgotten about the bastard in the room. F***CK your mother. Berserker Thunder had an explosive temper. He had always disliked the fish in the water. Now that something like this had happened to the dried fish, Berserker Thunder immediately flared up. He waved his staff and sent a bolt of lightning towards the fish. Watching Fish Underwater had no choice but to give up. Either way, he knew that he was definitely going to die. Even if he returned to Thunderstorm City, he would be completely isolated. With Violent Thunder World and Heart Alliance around, the Light faction would definitely not be able to survive. He might as well kill himself before these guys returned. He would betray the Light faction as soon as possible. Of course, he would not let these guys off easily even before he died. Therefore, when the Berserk Heavenly Thunder Lightning spell was thrown, the underwater fish had no intention of dodging. However, the moment the lightning struck the underwater fish, a white light rose and protected it. Holy light? Boss Wuji, what do you mean? Seeing the white holy light, Berserk Thunder God and the others looked at Wuji in disbelief. Wuji chuckled. Killing him now is letting him off easy. He has harmed so many of you. Do you only want to kill him once? Boss Wuji's words make sense. Berserk Thunder God immediately understood Wuji's words. He ordered in the guild channel, surround the Wizard Academy. Don't let fish underwater escape. Berserk Thunder God was confused. Surround him for what? They were allies just a moment ago. Now, they were going to kill him. This change was too fast. We'll talk when we get back. Just surround him, Berserk Thunder God said. Seeing that Wuji had seen through his scheme, underwater fish glared at Wuji with hatred. He said in the guild channel of the United Heart Alliance, Berserk Divine Wrath has colluded with the Dark Faction. I, Compassion, and the others are spies of Berserk Divine Wrath. Everyone, come to the revival point and save me. Holy *T. Is this for real? When the players of the United Heart Alliance received this explosive news, they were all thrown into disarray. I Touch Compassion and the others were core members of the United Heart Alliance, but now they had become spies. Even Berserk Heavenly Wrath's true spy was dumbfounded. They couldn't help but privately message, I Touch Compassion. Are you really a spy too? Undercover my ass. You liar, you will die a horrible death. Watching fish underwater was the guild leader, and he had a firm grasp on his authority. I Touch of Compassion and the others were powerless to defend themselves, so they simply roared angrily in the guild channel and left the guild. The United Heart Alliance players were confused again. Scammers? Undercover. Which one of you is telling the truth? Brothers, I swear on my honor. Before watching fish underwater could finish his sentence, another message popped up in the guild channel. System notice. Vice Guild Leader Flowing Cloud has left the guild. Buzz. Suddenly, the United Heart Alliance was in an uproar. Watching fish underwater's worthless oath of honor was instantly drowned out. Although Carefree Fish Underwater had a firm grip on power, the player base of One Heart Alliance was mainly made up of Nian Liuyin's fans. Carefree Fish Underwater was at most a manager. Nian Liuyin was the true pillar of support for One Heart Alliance. Now that even Flowing Cloud had left the guild, did it still matter who was the liar and the spy? If the idol was gone, the faith would be gone. The guild would be nothing. Swoosh, 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 swoosh. Message after message of leaving the guild popped up. In less than half a minute, less than 100 United Heart Alliance players had left the guild. The rest were all offline. When watching Fish Underwater saw this scene, his heart broke. Fucking Chuanjin. Fucking Flowing Cloud. You dare screw me over? Watching Fish Underwater was a scumbag in the end. He had brought this upon himself, but not only did he not realize his mistake at the last moment, he even pushed all the blame onto others. By then, Berserk Divine Wrath's members had already surrounded the resurrection point. Thunder God Berserk had personally sent Watching Fish Underwater to the resurrection point. When Quan Zhen's members saw Watching Fish Underwater turn into a white light, their faces were filled with disdain and ridicule. There were enough Berserk Divine Wrath members, and they had enough hatred for Watching Fish Underwater. This bastard would probably never leave the resurrection point. Huh? Isn't there no one in the house? Why is there lightning? At the same time, the Undead City players outside the house heard Watching Fish Underwater's cry and saw the lightning inside the house. Their gazes were drawn back to the house. As expected, they saw the Light Faction members inside the house, who had cast a lightning spell to nullify the bewildering formation. They're coming again. If I knew this would happen, I wouldn't have used the spell, Thunder God Berserk said, somewhat blaming himself when he saw the Undead City players closing in. Wuji smiled faintly and said, No need to blame yourself. After the first lightning spell, the invisibility effect disappeared. They just couldn't see it. Then what should we do now? Hold on. Hold on for as long as we can. Hopefully, we can share some of the pressure with Old Cow and let him escape, Wuji said. Wuji wasn't very confident when he said this. Although he hadn't seen the situation outside, it was just as Wang Yu had said, You guys have no idea how many 270,000 people there are. Wang Yu originally thought that he could rely on his qin gong to escape. However, when he ran to the harbor and saw the endless number of people, he gave up. There was a reason why the ancients used the term sea of people to describe a large number of people. As for what books said about taking the general's head from an army of tens of thousands, that was pure nonsense. With so many people, let alone squeezing through, not getting lost was also a kind of skill. After turning around, Wang Yu ran towards the deepest part of the harbor. Undead City's players were in hot pursuit. A mere harbor could only hold around 4,000 to 5,000 players. With so many players chasing after Wang Yu, one could just imagine how densely populated the harbor was. Even if Wang Yu could fly, he would still be knocked down by a volley of attacks. Since he was already moving forward, there was no turning back. Even if the road ahead was a dead end, Wang Yu had to brace himself and charge forward. Soon, Wang Yu was forced to the end of the harbor under the pursuit of a group of players, Undead Pier. In the past, the Undead Pier used to be a sea. Now, however, the sea had turned into a putrid swamp. The swamp didn't care about a player's attributes. Even if Wang Yu could kill a cow with one punch, jumping into the swamp would be like a clay ox entering the sea. Not even his bones would be left behind. Damn, every second counts. I'll try to buy as much time as possible for Wuji and the others. Looking at the endless swamp, Wang Yu steeled his heart. He turned around and stood on the pier. Then he slashed the ground with his staff, drawing a straight line. Chapter 595. Humans were born with a fear of the unknown. An almighty being who could walk among hundreds of thousands of people was quite intimidating when he put on such a pretentious act. Wang Yu swung his staff, and the Undead City players stopped in their tracks. However, they quickly reacted and cursed. F***ck me. This B***starred is pretending. Who are you trying to scare? That's right. Do you think you're worthy of occupying the broken water bridge? After all, these players had hundreds of thousands of people backing them up. It would be a joke if they were really scared. Wang Yu hooked his finger at the other side and said, "Try me if you're not convinced. F***ck, what a poser. Brothers, let's kill him together." No matter what, Wang Yu was someone who had been through thousands of soldiers and horses. No one would be stupid enough to challenge him to a duel. Of course, there were hundreds of thousands of people behind him, so there was no need to challenge him to a duel. The warrior at the front roared, and an entire row of warriors crouched down and rammed into Wang Yu. The pier was only 10 meters wide. Warriors, who were large and powerful, could only stand 10 in a row. Seeing the 10 warriors charging at him, Wang Yu jumped back and dodged the charge. He used his staff to lift himself off the ground and kicked out with both legs. The 10 warriors had just raised their heads after their charge when Wang Yu's foot stomped on their faces at almost the same time. Bang, 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 bang. After a series of sounds, bright red damage values appeared above the heads of the warriors. Their HP bars had also dropped to a critical level. Following that, Wang Yu's long staff swept over, and the 10 warriors with critical HP instantly turned into light. When the Undead City players saw this, they gasped in shock. Those were 10 warriors with strong defense, and their opponent was a Grandmaster of Combat who was so weak that he could not even take care of himself. This was definitely unexpected. Even though everyone knew that this Grandmaster of Combat could charge through an army of thousands, there were only so many attributes that a player could have. High agility meant low attack. However, this guy who ran like a rabbit had killed 10 warriors in one hit. Was this not a joke? After Wang Yu killed the 10 warriors, he continued to point his staff at the ground and said coldly, "Those who cross the line die." With the previous example, none of the Undead City players dared to charge forward. They looked at each other and took a step back. "Assassin, where's the assassin?" the Undead City players shouted. If a frontal attack was not possible, they would ambush from behind. This was the logic of most players. Fighters were fragile classes. How could they withstand a combo from an assassin? The assassins of Undead City entered stealth and charged at Wang Yu. Wang Yu faintly smiled. With a wave of her hand, a white light swept out. In the next moment, an assassin appeared in Wang Yu's hand. Wang Yu grabbed the assassin and swung his arm forward, throwing the assassin out. There was a series of screams, and then the pier was littered with people lying on the ground. Wang Yu jumped above the crowd and landed with a thunderstomp. Another white light flashed. "Those who cross the line die," Wang Yu said again. This time, the Undead City players were completely dumbfounded. The warriors couldn't defeat him in a frontal attack, and even the assassin with stealth couldn't do it. Was this guy cheating? He has an anti-stealth skill and can attack from afar. Everyone, don't charge forward. Attack him from afar. At this time, Warped Horse shouted from within the crowd. When the Undead City players heard this, they were slightly stunned. Then, they fiercely slapped themselves in the face. Damn it. Just because someone said, "Those who cross the line will die," they rushed forward like idiots. Yet, they forgot about the ranged classes. That was too stupid. Since those who cross the line will die, can't they just not cross the line? Thinking up to this point, the archers and mages of Undead City started to attack Wang Yu. Wang Yu's heart sank as he watched the chaotic barrage of skills from the other side. If they were in an orderly formation and attacked together, Wang Yu could still survive a wave of attacks with his telekinesis barrier. However, the Undead City players were disorganized and undisciplined. They threw out their skills randomly. With so many people attacking together, they inadvertently made up for the stun and cooldown of skills. Moreover, the attacks of the Undead City players were based on arrows and magic. If they only had arrows, they could block physical attacks with their weapons. However, with the exception of certain skills, they couldn't block magic attacks at all. In less than 2 seconds, Wang Yu's telekinesis barrier broke. Taking advantage of the 5 seconds of invulnerability, Wang Yu used Undying Heart. After holding on for another 10 or so seconds, just as the effect of the Undying Heart was about to end and Wang Yu was about to be blasted into smithereens, Wang Yu suddenly froze for a moment and then shouted, "Even if I die, I won't die in the hands of you people." Immediately after, Wang Yu jumped back, his entire body submerging into the undead swamp. Damn, he actually killed himself. Seeing Wang Yu jump into the swamp, the people from the City of Departed Spirits were in a bad mood. Damn it, they had been led around by this guy, and had even let him kill so many people. In the end, they didn't even get to see the white light of his death. What was he trying to achieve? At this moment, someone shouted, "Don't just stand there, the rest are in the wooden huts at the harbor." Sigh. Hearing this, everyone sighed. It was always best to get what they couldn't get. Even though they heard that they had found the others, they still felt regretful that they couldn't kill Wang Yu. Their mood for hunting him down also became low. At the wooden huts, Wuji and the others were completely trapped inside. Although the wooden huts were easy to defend and difficult to attack, and a single shield warrior could block the door, no matter how easy it was to defend and difficult to attack, there was still a limit to how many people they could use. Under the endless attacks, the shield warriors in the wooden huts could only block for 1 second. Even if everyone took turns to block the door, they could only survive for a few more minutes. 5 minutes later, all the shield warriors in the huts had lost their durability. Even the backup shields had lost their durability. Damn, Wuji, we can't hold on any longer. Inlao Air's giant shield and golden shield were both destroyed. At this moment, he was so heartbroken that tears were rolling down his cheeks. "Hold on, buy time for old cow," Wuji shouted. "Haha, your companion who ran like a rabbit has already jumped into the undead swamp to commit suicide." The Undead City players outside the door heard Wuji's words and mocked. What? Hearing this from the Undead City players, the morale of the people in the huts plummeted. Even Wang Yu was dead. There was no point in holding on. "Don't listen to their nonsense," Wuji said. "The interface shows that old cow isn't dead yet." Huh? That's right. These guys are trying to play the besieged game with us. Why don't they go out and find out what I do? When the Quanjin players saw that the number of people in the neutral faction on the screen did not drop to 0, their morale rose again. Thunder God was also infected by the enthusiasm of the Quanjin players. He pointed at the door and said to everyone, "Everyone, follow me and block the way." Hold on for as long as you can. Chapter 596. Huh, the undead swamp looks like this? Wang Yu stared at the scene before him, his face filled with disbelief. After jumping into the swamp, Wang Yu was not devoured. Instead, he dived into the swamp. However, the scenery below the undead swamp was a completely different world from the undead swamp above. Moreover, it was different from ordinary swamps. When Wang Yu was in Yuhuicheng, he had dived into a swamp before. The swamp was pitch black, and he could not see anything. However, the undead swamp was as blue as the sea. Wang Yu was surrounded by all kinds of marine life. The scenery was more beautiful than any underwater world. Directly below Wang Yu was a huge, transparent barrier. Inside the barrier was something that looked like a city. At this moment, the Atlantic key in Wang Yu's bag emitted a blue glow. Immediately, Wang Yu received a system notification. You have discovered the undead city's hidden map, Dark Sea. Obtained 50,000 EXP. In the wooden house at Kuel Harbor, Thunder God and the others rushed to the door. Under the concentrated fire of the undead city players, they turned into white light. In 10 seconds, only Chuanjin's group was left in the wooden house. Go to the sides of the door. Wuji pointed to the sides of the wooden house and shouted. The wooden house was an invincible unit. The sides of the wooden house's small door were the safest cover. Previously, there were too many people to hide, so they could only fight. Now that there were fewer people, the wooden house was suddenly open, and they had the conditions to hide. After Chuanjin's group hid on the sides of the door, the undead city players immediately lost their target. Hence, the frontline classes raised their shields and rushed forward. However, the door was narrow. No matter how many people rushed forward, only one could enter the house. Chuanjin's group hid on the sides and waited. As soon as the undead city warrior entered the door, he was turned into white light by Chuanjin's group. Damn, these be asterisk starts. Seeing the warrior in the lead die as soon as he entered, the undead city players behind him stood at the door in shock, not daring to take a step forward. No one was stupid. Of course, they knew what would happen if only one person entered the wooden hut in this kind of terrain. There was a group of tigers and wolves in the wooden hut. Entering rashly was basically giving away glory. What should we do? Seeing that there were less than 40 minutes remaining, Undead City's players grew anxious. 40 minutes later, the light faction would win. They could not let this continue. It wasn't that there weren't any intelligent players in Undead City. However, there were hundreds of thousands of players in Undead City. Everyone only knew their own small group. A few words from a few people could be drowned out in minutes. However, even if there was no other way, there was still a solution. In the end, the majority of the players reached a consensus, and that was to give it their all and charge in with their lives. They refused to believe that they couldn't get in. Most likely, only the current Undead City's players could come up with such a shameless method. After all, Undead City's players weren't the only ones lacking in manpower. After reaching an agreement, the soldiers in the front row of the Undead City charged forward, barging into the wooden house one after another. It had to be said that the Undead City's players were so reckless that Quan Zhen's members were thrown into confusion. Crap, are they tired of living? Seeing so many players desperately barging into the wooden house, Mingjin Daoxiu and Baiming Youyu, who stood at the very front, began to panic. This group of brainless people wants to force their way in. Wuji's originally calm expression also became unnatural. Shield warriors were known for their high defense. If they wanted to instantly kill a shield warrior, they would have to use skills. However, skills had cooldowns. Faced with the fearless and endless stream of Undead City's players, skills would not be able to keep up. In the beginning, the players could rely on their powerful equipment and techniques to control their skills' cooldowns to deal with the Undead City's players. However, as time passed, their skills would run out of cooldowns. Wuji wanted to cry, but no tears came out. This was the true meaning of using nothing to overcome everything. The human wave tactic was too brainless. 5 minutes later, an Undead City's shield warrior finally managed to barge into the wooden house. With the first shield warrior entering, Chuanjin's defensive line was like a broken dam. Over 100 undead cities players rushed in, completely filling up the wooden house. Other than Bao San and Yin Lauer, the rest of the Chuanjin sex people were all fragile. They were originally hiding in the corner, but they were squeezed by this group of thick-skinned fellows and hung on the wall like a painting. Wuji was a bit better off. He had invulnerability, so he wasn't squeezed too much. However, Mingdu and Chun Xiang, who also had cloth armor, were in a miserable state. The two of them were curled up in a corner like dogs. Even their staffs were stepped on, so they couldn't cast any spells. The Undead Cities players didn't stay idle either. Although they couldn't attack, that didn't stop their bodies from moving. They all squeezed to the side, trying to squeeze Chuanjin's team to death. The system's design was very humane. Chuanjin's team's HP slowly dropped. To place one's pride was squeezed to tears. I've been a hero all my life. Am I going to be squeezed to death? Wrong. I'm going to be trampled to death. Mingdu didn't forget to make fun of him. Only +1. Chun Xiang seconded. Exquisite Dream said, "Go to hell. I haven't even complained yet." What are you guys arguing about, Chuanjin's players heard this and immediately looked at Exquisite Dream and Yang Na. The Undead Cities players all had perverted smiles on their faces as they squeezed themselves onto the two girls. Exquisite Dream was slightly better off as she shouted, "Be careful. Where are your perverted pig hands touching?" Yang Na was so scared that her face turned pale. She stuck close to the wall and pushed forward with both hands, try to push away the people squeezing over. However, she was an archer, so she couldn't move a tank. Soon, she was pressed against the wall. Of course, even if it was a holographic simulation, there was a bottom line in the game. After the two of them were pressed against the wall, the system determined that they had lost HP. Then it automatically isolated the sensitive areas. Looking at the twisted faces of the two girls squeezed by the group of men, the horny Chuanjin students instantly fell silent. They simultaneously shouted in their hearts, "I'm so envious." Just as the Chuanjin group was about to be squeezed to death, Wuji suddenly received a message from Wang Yu. "Wuji, give me the team leader." Wuji saw that it was Wang Yu's message and did not hesitate to hand over the team to Wang Yu. The next moment, everyone in Chuanjin received a system notification. Your team leader, Iron Ox, invites you to enter the underwater world of Atlan. Do you accept? Everyone was about to be squeezed to death. How could they have a choice? Without hesitation, they agreed. Swoosh! A white light flashed before the Undead Cities players' eyes. The Chuanjin group disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. F*CK, stop squeezing. They're dead. We won. Chapter 597. The Spectre City players were stunned. They opened the quest menu and saw a glaring 10 next to the light faction members. What was even more glaring was the 1 next to the neutral faction members. This is impossible. I saw that guy from a neutral faction jump into the Spectre swamp with my own eyes. The players who had been chasing after Wang, you could not sit still when they saw that not only were Chuanjin's members alive, but even Wang Yu was still alive. They had been in Spectre City for a long time, and they knew very well what kind of place the Spectre Swamp was. It was impossible to come out alive after jumping into it. However, Wang Yu's existence made everyone realize that there was either a bug in the system or someone was cheating. I saw those people in the house turn into white light with my own eyes. The players who saw Chuanjin's members disappear were also dissatisfied. They had clearly turned into white light, but they did not die. Could they be revived? At this moment, an experienced player reminded them, turning into white light doesn't necessarily mean death. They might have been teleported. Teleported? The crowd was in an uproar. Could it be a teleportation scroll? With a reminder from the veteran players, everyone was relieved. Why did Wang Yu not die after jumping into the Spectre Swamp? Why did the people in the wooden house suddenly disappear? They had used a teleportation tool. Damn it, these F*King pay-to-win players. Thinking up to this point, the crowd could not help but curse. Currently, the only thing that could teleport people in the game was the teleportation scroll, and the random teleportation scroll. However, both of these scrolls could only be made by spatial magicians, and each of them was priceless. The current market price of a return scroll was 1,000 gold coins per scroll, and the random teleportation scroll was even more expensive. It was 5,000 gold coins per scroll. 11 people would cost 55,000 gold coins. If converted to RMB, that would be real money. Wasn't it just a guild being demoted? Why would they spend so much money to escape? They could buy another guild with that amount of gold coins. These pay-to-win players were crazy. Normal players had always been hostile toward pay-to-win players. When they saw Chuanjin's members teleport away, their resentment deepened. There were pay-to-win players in Spectre City, but they were the minority. When they saw so many angry players, no matter how arrogant they were in the past, they could only endure silently, afraid that they would be blamed. Let's search. The random teleportation scroll teleports them randomly. They don't know where they are. We still have enough time. We still have a chance. I don't believe they have more scrolls on them. Usually, a tycoon would only carry one teleportation scroll for self-defense. If one carried two, then he wasn't just a tycoon, but a brainless tycoon. In the quest setting, returning to the city was considered a surrender. Return scrolls absolutely could not be used. The random scrolls had already been used, so the Quanjin players definitely would not have a second chance to teleport. There were still around 30 minutes left, which was more than enough for hundreds of thousands of people to sweep through the Undead Swamp. However, what Undead City's players didn't know was that with Chuanjin's personality, they would rather die than suffer a loss. Why would they buy a luxury item like a teleportation scroll? At this time, the scene in front of Chuanjin's eyes changed, and they arrived at the Netherworld Sea. When they saw the scenery of the Netherworld Sea and the city under the transparent cover, everyone's expression was the same as Wang Yu's at the beginning. Above everyone's head, like Wang Yu, a time bar appeared. The channeling bar was the breathing rate. Players who had not learned diving or were wearing underwater breathing tools would have such a thing appear above their heads when they entered an underwater scene. The average player could only breathe underwater for 120 seconds. Wang Yu was quite amazing. The channeling bar above his head was a total of 720 seconds. You're all here. When Wang Yu saw everyone, he went up to greet them warmly. Where is this? Everyone asked curiously. Beneath the undead swamp, replied Wang Yu with a smile. F*CK. You really jumped into the swamp. Why didn't you die? Wuji asked curiously. Wang Yu chuckled and pointed at the Frog Sovereign's heart on his neck. Then, he displayed its attributes. Swamp Walk, active skill, possesses the strength of the Frog Sovereign. Can dive into the swamp for 30 seconds. Cooldown time, 60 seconds. Cost, MP 200. TSK. I didn't expect you to have such a strange item. Everyone could not help but exclaim. At the same time, they danced and said, How do we get out? We're drowning. Haha, follow me. Wang Yu looked at everyone's panicked expressions and laughed. He swam toward the transparent cover below, and everyone followed closely behind. Everyone followed Wang Yu to the transparent cover. Wang Yu took out the Atlan key that was glowing with blue light and placed it in a groove. Then, an entrance appeared on the cover. Wang Yu and the Chuanjin people were sucked in along with the seawater. On the monitoring team's side, Little Zhang saw this scene and said loudly, Director Hao, the Atlan ruins have opened. Got it. I'm watching, 9527 said calmly, his eyes fixed on everyone on the screen. The other staff members of the monitoring team looked over and said in surprise, Atlan ruins? That's a level 60 hidden scene, right? Why is it opening now? A freak combination of factors. But what's more troublesome now is that they're still fighting the group war, Little Zhang said with a headache. How should he put it? The Atlan ruins and the group war were originally two unrelated missions. But because of Chuanjin's actions, a bug that was not a bug actually appeared. The Netherworld Sea and the Atlan ruins were both dungeon scenes within the Undead Swamp. But no one would have thought that Wang Yu had the Frog Sovereign's heart. He directly jumped into the swamp and used the team leader's access to enter the dungeon to pull the Chuanjin people in. As such, the members of the Quanjin sect hid in a place that the players of Undead City could not find. Even if the players of Undead City knew where the members of the Quanjin sect were, they would not be able to enter without special equipment. This setting originally did not have a bug, but the actions of the Chuanjin people had indeed exploited a loophole in the system. If it were any other day, little Zhang would not have had such a headache, but now they were in the middle of a group war. King entered the dungeon and caused trouble for others. This was absolutely unfair to the players of the Dark faction. Although as a GM, he could not intervene in the battles of the players in the game. The group war had always been a money-making tool in the game. Only the group war could let all the players know the gap between them, and then rush in to buy gold and equipment. Now that the people of Chuanjin had done this, what would the players of the Dark faction think? In the future, if everyone used bugs to complete missions, the game would not earn anything. Chapter 598. After the Quanjin members were sucked into the shield, they immediately received a system notification. System notification. You have discovered a large-scale hidden dungeon, Deep Sea City, Atlan's Ruins. A hidden dungeon, and a large-scale one at that. F***CK. It's a hidden dungeon. We're rich. F***CK. Why is a large-scale dungeon? F***CKU. After receiving the system notification, the Quanjin members' mood instantly went from heaven to hell. Mingdu, who was always expressionless, did not know whether to laugh or cry. The others' expressions were also mixed with sorrow and joy, incomparably conflicted. The joy was that the key's final decryption turned out to be a hidden dungeon. Hidden dungeons were things that could only be encountered by luck. They were synonymous with high production and high quality. Since the start of the game, the number of players who had encountered a hidden dungeon could be counted on one hand. Most players had only heard of it. The sad thing was that this was originally a large-scale hidden dungeon. Like faction dungeons, hidden dungeons were not divided into levels. However, like normal dungeons, these dungeons were also divided into sizes. Like normal dungeons, hidden dungeons were divided into miniature dungeons, small dungeons, intermediate dungeons, and large-scale dungeons. Miniature dungeons were like beginner dungeons, like the Scarlet Church. The minimum number of players was no less than 5. Small dungeons were dungeons with a party as a unit. Medium dungeons were dungeons with dozens of players. As for large-scale dungeons, they were the legendary guild dungeons. Guild dungeons were the most difficult dungeons in Rebirth. Not only were these dungeons huge in scale, but the boss was also extremely powerful. It often required a guild to die countless times before they could complete the first clear. This showed the difficulty of large-scale dungeons. Most importantly, in the game settings, the minimum level for large-scale dungeons was 60. According to the convention that hidden dungeons were generally more difficult than normal dungeons, this Atlan's Ruins before them required at least level 60 to attempt it. No wonder Watching Fish Underwater knew the secret of the key, but did not explore it. It turned out that he also knew the difficulty of this dungeon and wanted to wait until he was level 60 to try it. As the saying goes, reincarnation is good. Watching Fish Underwater had inadvertently tricked the people from Chuanjin. Why don't we wait here until the faction battle is over before going out? Mingdu said wretchedly. Wang Yu shook his head. We can't go out. The key has disappeared. Wang Yu had only just finished speaking when everyone received another system prompt. You have accepted the hidden instance dungeon quest Ruins of an Ancient Civilization. The ruins of an ancient civilization, magic and technology, created the Atlan civilization, whose name shook the continent. The rise of the Atlan civilization ushered humans into a new era. However, ignorant humans attempted to use civilization to challenge God's authority. Feeling threatened, God drowned them with the waters of the Netherworld Sea, causing all records of Atlan to disappear along with Atlan. Quest notice: destroy the God Golem. Quest failure level -2. You will lose a piece of equipment. F***CK, this is too shameless. Isn't this forcing us to die? After seeing the system's mandatory mission, everyone cursed. God's puppet. Just from a name alone, one could tell that it wasn't easy to deal with them. The background story of Rebirth was about the supremacy of the gods. According to the game's usual style, anything with a god in its name wasn't easy to deal with. Not to mention that the backer of this god's puppet was a god. In the game's background story, gods did not do many good things, but bad things were innumerable. For example, the Angela tribe that was cursed because they did not believe in God, and the unfortunate Atlan civilization that was doomed eternally because they threatened the theocracy. All these signs showed that the so-called God was a narrow-minded bastard, after killing his subordinates, who knew what kind of trap they would be set up for. Moreover, this was a hidden instance dungeon with a level of at least 60. At this stage, it was already difficult for players to kill monsters that were 30 levels higher than them, let alone stronger instance dungeon monsters. Especially the monsters in the hidden instance dungeon. They were even stronger than the monsters in the ordinary instance dungeons. There was no chance of winning at all. The penalty for failure was even worse. At this stage, players were only over level 30, which was not considered too high. If they lost 2 levels, they could train it back in 2 days. However, a player's equipment was their life. Randomly losing a piece of equipment was simply using a player's life to force them to die. Take Xuanzhen's group, for example. Although their equipment could not be said to be the best in the game, everyone had 1 or 2 items that could be used until the end of their lives. Losing any one of them would cost them half their lives. Who would have thought that a simple decryption mission would put everyone in a dilemma? Thunder God, did you catch the fish underwater? Wuji opened the friends column and asked Thunder God Berserk. I killed him twice. I'm offline. How are you guys now? Thunder God Berserk said, Don't worry, we're completely safe. Guard the fish underwater and kill a few more F***ers to vent my anger. Wuji said angrily, Understood. I think we should give it a try. Seeing that everyone retreated in the face of difficulties, Wang Yu stood up and said, Don't make a fuss. Instead of wasting energy, why don't we kill ourselves and return to the city after the faction war is over? Wuji said calmly. Wuji's words weren't because he was afraid. It was because Wuji always did things according to his capabilities. Whether it was the advantage of equipment or the terrain, as long as he had the slightest bit of confidence, Wuji would dare to try. He would never do something he had no confidence in. Right now, they were in a level 60 plus large-scale hidden dungeon. What was a large-scale dungeon? That was a dungeon that even hundreds of level 60 players would have to die many times to clear. Not to mention, this was a hidden dungeon. Every monster inside was probably stronger than an ordinary boss. They had no chance of success at all. Wang Yu smiled and said, Since we're going to die anyway, we might as well give it a try. Whether we can clear it or not, we should at least familiarize ourselves with it. This, Wuji pondered for a moment, then asked the others, What do you guys think? It doesn't matter. The result will be the same anyway. Everyone said, although it wasn't Xuanzhen's style to go into the mountains knowing that there was a tiger in the mountains, it wasn't their style to be afraid before they even started fighting. Okay, then we'll leave one of us here to waste time in the faction war. The others will go check out this dungeon. Wuji said, Little Meng, wait here. Linglong Meng said with a stern face, Bullsh *T. Why should I stay? The ugliest one stays. If she could play with everyone, who would be willing to stay here alone? Everyone heard this and looked at Mingdu. Mingdu said angrily, Mother of *Her. Why are you looking at me? Am I ugly? Well, to be honest, oldly, it's not a matter of whether you're ugly or not. Normal people would probably dream of seeing you. Chun Xiang smiled. That's right. I dreamed of oldly last night. To place one's pride at it. Really? What's wrong with dreaming about the two of you? Everyone asked excitedly. To place one's pride said, I dreamed that oldly returned the money he owed me. Hey, you brat, give me the IOU. I've already returned the money. Why do you still need the IOU? Get lost, shameless. Chapter 599. Seeing that Ming Do and Gao were about to fight, and that the others were still jeering from the side, Wuji's head started to swell as he said, "Fine, fine, fine. I'll stay here." Wuji didn't want to clear this dungeon in the first place. Since no one wanted to stay, Wuji was right. "Don't make a fuss. How are we going to clear this dungeon if you don't go?" Actually, Chuanjin was similar to One Heart Alliance. One of them was a fighter, and the other was a civil one. However, Chuanjin didn't have many people. Moreover, Chuanjin's members were all sinister, so they were more flexible than those from One Heart Alliance. If they didn't have Wang Yu, they would be exhausted. If they didn't have Wu Ji, they would also be exhausted. Now that Wu Ji said he didn't want to go, everyone immediately panicked. Wu Ji spread his hands. "I can't do anything even if I go. Under the absolute suppression of strength, even my leadership can't make up for the difference in stats. If you can't command, you can heal." Wang Yu said. Wu Ji said, "Heal my ass. Do you know how high the elite monsters in a level 60 hidden dungeon are? They can instantly kill the second boss. Which one of us can stand up?" Yin Lao scratched his head, "But I feel like it's better if you're at the back. Why don't we take a picture?" Mingdu suggested. "How about a black and white one?" To place one's pride, and Mingdu immediately formed a line of defense against Wuji. "Get lost." Wuji waved his hand to chase the two away. "I've commanded so many battles and have never lost. I don't want to lose my reputation here." "Well, so that's how you got your ever-victorious title." Everyone laughed at him. Wuji's skin was thick. He only snorted in response to everyone's mockery. At this moment, Yang Na, who had been observing the surroundings, suddenly said, "I don't think it's important who stays behind because none of us will be able to enter the door." "What's going on?" everyone hurriedly asked. Yang Na said, "This Atlan ruin is a complete main city. There should only be 4 entrances. There are 10 monsters at the entrance in front of us." "Really?" Hearing Yang Na's words, Wang Yu ran forward for a while. As expected, there were 10 large monsters blocking the entrance to Atlan City. Wang Yu cast detection over. Atlan Guardian? HP. MP. Skills. Apart from their names, these monsters were all question marks. Wang Yu was now level 40. This showed that the Atlan Guardian was at least level 60, just as Wuji had said. As this was a hidden dungeon, it could be even higher. These monsters were huge, and 10 of them blocked the city entrance tightly. Moreover, there were many other monsters inside the city. If they fought head-on, they would definitely alarm the other monsters. Under the level suppression, each of these monsters had the attributes of an ordinary boss. If they attacked in groups, Chuanjin would definitely die. In fact, this was reasonable. Large-scale dungeons could only be entered by a few hundred people. If Chuanjin wanted to charge through with just 10 people, he would be looking down on the other players. Since this city entrance was set up like this, the other 4 city gates must be the same. With so many monsters on the path they had to pass, it seemed like they had no chance of evading. "What do you think? I told you to stay here obediently. Oldly, take out your mahjong. Let's play a few rounds." When Wang Yu returned and told him what he had seen, Wu Ji simply sat on the ground. Mingdu heard him and took out a small table, then a set of crudely made mahjong tiles. **, oldly, count me in. Mahjong could only be played by 4 people. When the others saw this, they quickly scrambled for a spot. Mingdu pushed people off the table and shouted at Wang Yu, "Old cow, do you want to play? I made this mahjong myself. It's purely handmade. I don't know how to. You guys play, I'll go take a look." Wang Yu said calmly. "Go take a look? Where?" When everyone heard this, they were stunned. "In the city," Wang Yu said. **CK, you're crazy. This instance dungeon isn't for our level. You saw it too? We can't even enter the city gates." "That's right. Brother Iron Ox, I'll be your strategist. If we win, how about we split the money?" Everyone tried to persuade him one after another. Wang Yu smiled and said, "It's true that the city gates are blocked, but I can jump over the walls to get in." When they heard Wang Yu say this, everyone immediately reacted. This man could even jump over the walls of Iron Rock Fort, not to mention the city walls here. "Then go. Be careful. If you can't escape, just wait for death. Don't lead us out of the city. Even if you want to die, we want to live." Everyone casually explained and began to shuffle the tiles. Got it. Wang Yu smiled and walked toward Atlan City. At that time, little Zhang, who was sitting in front of the surveillance screen, became excited again. Director Hao, that kid wants to enter the city alone. What's going on in this kid's head? 9527 quickly poked his head over and saw that on the monitor, Wang Yu was walking in the direction of Atlan City. 9527's brain could not process what was going on. At first, when he saw the Chuanjin team hesitating at the city gates for a long time without moving, 9527 thought that they had retreated in the face of difficulties and was feeling smug. After all, it was a large hidden level 60 dungeon, so these guys' performance was considered normal. After all, things like cheats were completely different when used by one person and by a group of people. However, Wang Yu's actions directly dumbfounded 9527. Such a large group dungeon, even a few hundred people might not be able to clear it. Did this guy want to clear it alone? Lock onto his data and activate anomaly detection. 9527 quickly said, he should be using cheats now. No wonder we can't detect his data. It turns out that this guy knows anti-detection. In 9527's eyes, if Wang Yu dared to solo the dungeon alone, he must be fearless. And the thing that could make people fearless must be cheats. Since ancient times, there have been countless online games that have been destroyed by cheats. Every online game was absolutely against cheats. Detecting cheats was naturally the most important thing. However, the gaming world was so big, especially for a game as popular as Rebirth, which had hundreds of millions of players. The system could not possibly cover every single detail. Therefore, some cheat users could use cheats every now and then to escape the system's detection. I'm not exaggerating. This is how I evaded detection back then. This is purely from experience. Chapter 600. The Atlan City was about the same size as an ordinary main city. The city wall was less than 20 meters high, and the guard arrangement on the city wall was no different from that of an ordinary main city. There were a few Atlan magic spear guards every few meters. The guns here were flintlock guns. The barrels were nearly 2 meters long, and there was a large magic crystal hanging at the back. It was quite dazzling. The magic spear guards were the same as the guards at the door. They had dull eyes and were puppet monsters. Puppet monsters had always had low intelligence, but their attributes were twice or even higher than monsters of the same level. Their double defense was even more frighteningly high. Wang Yu was not in the mood to provoke these brainless guys. If it were not for the fact that these monsters were difficult to deal with and that Wang Yu was afraid of alerting the surrounding guards, he would have gone over and snatched a few of them. There were guards at the door and on the wall. Wang Yu could not just randomly choose a place to go up, so he walked along the wall to the side. On the monitoring team's side, 9527 and the others were a little puzzled when they saw Wang Yu not entering the city, but circling around the wall. What's this guy doing? Looking at the scenery? Why do I feel like he's looking for a back door? Xiao Zhang muttered. The back door was a hidden entrance and exit that every main city in the game had. Except for cities like the Elven City and Titan City that did not even have city walls, the back door of most main cities refer to the main city's drainage pipe. By the way, is there a small door in this scenario? This main city is F** King submerged in water. Where's the sewer? Then I'll have to see how he's going to get in. The monitoring team was discussing Wang Yu's intentions when they saw Wang Yu go along the wall to the corner of the wall and stop at the foot of the wall. At that time, 9527 suddenly shouted, I know, he's going to jump over the wall. The arrow towers at the four corners of the main city were the blind spots of the city wall guards. Even Lien Chunxiang knew this, let alone the game staff. As soon as Wang Yu stood at the corner, 9527 saw through Wang Yu's intentions. As soon as 9527's voice trailed off, he saw Wang Yu stepping on the wall and jumping up to the top of the wall. His movements were clean and neat, and it was obvious that he was a habitual offender. Hiss! 9527 sucked in a breath of cold air and said with palpitation, "He knows how to use a grappling hook and climb over walls so quickly. What does this kid do in real life?" Everyone was silent for a moment before saying, "This isn't something we should care about. Focus on the main point. Focus on the main point." Wang Yu, who had jumped on top of the wall, looked around and realized that Wu Ji and the others were not here. He was right. Currently, in Atlan City, not only had the guards at the gates turned into puppet monsters, but even the NPC citizens on the streets were silent, their movements stiff. The monsters in Rebirth were very realistic. Even the ordinary NPCs were lifelike. Now that the citizens of Atlan City were like this, they must have also become puppets. This was really King's sinful. Although these NPCs were just a set of data and their background stories were fictitious, Wang Yu was still in this world. He could not help but feel some trepidation when he saw the so-called gods of this world doing such crazy things. Fortunately, it was Wang Yu himself who came. Otherwise, there were tens of thousands of NPCs in a main city, and this did not include the boss monsters. Even if a major guild came to this dungeon, without a few hundred people, they would still kneel. It was convenient for Wang Yu to run and jump alone, but if he brought others along, they would probably not be of any help and would even cause a lot of trouble. The view from a city wall was limited, so Wang Yu jumped off the wall. "Intruder." As soon as Wang Yu landed, he heard a very mechanical voice, and then a female NPC rushed over stiffly. "Teacher Annie, LV20, puppet, civilian, HP, 5000 MP, 5000 skills, nun monster introduction, God Sinner, used to be a teacher." How pitiful. Seeing the monster's introduction, Wang Yu sighed regretfully. He reached out and grabbed teacher Annie's neck, slamming her against the city wall beside him. 2534-3774 teacher Annie was killed in one hit. Just as Wang Yu wanted to loot the body, there was a sudden boom. Teacher Annie, who had just been killed by Wang Yu, exploded into pieces and a few pages fell to the ground. Any abnormalities in the data? Seeing that Wang Yu had killed teacher Annie in one hit, 9527 turned to ask Little Jean. Although teacher Annie was only a level 20 monster, she still had 5000 HP. If this damage was from a mage's skill, there would be no problem, but from a grandmaster of combat, it was strange. Neck break completion rate, 320%. Tiger strike caused impact damage. Data normal. Little Zhang sent the test report back to 9527. 320% completion rate. 9527 was stunned. Is that even possible? Could his real profession be specialized? As it spoke, 9527 gestured at its neck. Well, Wang Yu's identity had suddenly changed from a petty thief to a killer. F***CK. Director How? You're not a criminal investigator. Why are you so concerned about his real identity? Focus on the main point. Everyone was angry and amused at the same time. It can even explode. Seeing that teacher Annie had been reduced to nothing, Wang Yu secretly wiped the cold sweat off his forehead. He thought to himself that this monster was very cunning. Fortunately, he was soft-hearted and only threw him to his death. Otherwise, he would have been blown to death. Wang Yu went forward and picked up teacher Annie's belongings. Intermediate language. Rare item, life skill. Proficiency in one language after learning. Common for all professions. What do you think of this? Wang Yu displayed the attributes of intermediate language in the guild channel. F***CK. This is good stuff. You've only been gone for a few minutes, and you've already killed a boss? Seeing the items sent by Wang Yu, the people of Xuanzhen asked in surprise. Basic life skills could be learned anywhere, but intermediate life skills had to be slowly accumulated. There was another way to quickly improve, which was to obtain life skill books. However, the drop rate of life skill books was pitifully low. Instead of using the time to obtain life skill books, it was better to slowly farm experience. At this time, Wang Yu had casually obtained the rarest language life skill book. Everyone thought that he had picked up a boss. No, I just casually killed a low-level monster. This monster seemed to be a teacher, Wang Yu said calmly. F***CK, where are you? We're going over now. Hearing what Wang Yu said, everyone was excited. The drop rate a hidden dungeon was too scary. Wang Yu could casually kill a teacher and obtain a language skill. If he could casually kill a blacksmith, wouldn't he be able to obtain a divine weapon? If he could farm all the NPCs in the city, wouldn't everyone be invincible when they went out? I'm afraid you won't be able to enter. Wang Yu's words extinguished everyone's enthusiasm. There are guards everywhere on the city wall. I jumped over from the arrow tower. If we force our way in, we definitely won't be able to do it. Chapter 601. F***CK. When the others heard Wang Yu's words, they all criticized him. Old cow, it's not right for you to show off like this. Do you know that? That's right. It's fine that you got yourself something good, but you're making us jealous. Where's your conscience? Disdain, endless disdain. That makes sense. Wang Yu muttered. I'm going to walk around the skill mentors. Since you're saying that, I won't tell you if there's something good later. F***CK me. Old cow, go take a stroll around the church and see if you can kill the grand priest. That way you can get some god equipment and god skills from the priest. Wuji said excitedly. Uncle Nyo, let's go to the dojo. To place one's pride said loudly. The others followed suit. To the warrior camp, to the archer shooting range, Mingdu was even more exaggerated. He used emojis to spam the screen. Uncle Nyo, let's go to the Wizard Academy. There must be something good there. Then, he was muted by Wuji. Then, Mingdu messaged Wang Yu crazily, but Wang Yu's fingers slipped and he was blacklisted. At this moment, Wang Yu suddenly heard footsteps around her. She hurriedly looked up and saw countless NPC puppets surrounding them. It seemed that they had been attracted by the explosion just now. Behind the NPC puppets were guards. In a short while, the NPCs blocked both sides of Wang Yu's path. These NPCs were of different levels. Many of them had question marks on their attributes. There was even a guy whose name was a question mark. Wang Yu immediately broke out in a cold sweat. He had just blown up an NPC, and even a super big boss had been lured out. If he killed a few more, he would die in advance. Damn, I can't go anywhere this time. Wang Yu was secretly depressed. He jumped onto the roof. The puppet monster's limbs were stiff, and it was painful to even walk. As for the technical work of going up to the roof, not many people could do it. Moreover, these puppet monsters were brainless. Once they identified their aggro, they would follow them to the end. When Wang Yu was on the rooftop, they tirelessly tiptoed up from under the eaves. Only the guards and the NPCs whose attributes could not be seen chased after him. The other NPCs could only follow him around the streets. Even if the majority of the NPCs remained under the house, the pursuers were the most frightening. Wang Yu did not dare to slack off. He activated his lightness skill and fled. As soon as Wang Yu ran away, the NPCs on the ground began to gather like a rolling snowball. Originally, Wang Yu wanted to find a safe place to hide. Who would have thought that these NPCs would react so strongly? Wang Yu had nowhere to hide. Old cow, how is it? Did you kill the high priest? Wuji was still shouting in the channel. Screw you. I'm being chased by an NPC again. Putting aside the fact that the great high priest, as a servant of God, would be turned into a puppet, the NPC on Wang Yu's side, whose name wasn't even displayed, was already not far behind Wang Yu. How could he have the time to deal with the great high priest? Wang Yu didn't know what kind of sin he had committed in his life. Every time he went to a main city, he would be chased by NPCs and guards for several streets. Who the hell did he offend? He was just playing a game, so why did he have to incur the wrath of the gods? After running wildly, Wang Yu had already reached the end of the roof. If he continued running, he would reach a wide street. Opposite the street was a row of tall buildings. The street was filled with NPCs. If he went down, he would definitely be in trouble. F***CK. Looks like I can only run up. Seeing that the NPC behind him was about to catch up, Wang Yu gritted his teeth and changed his weapon into a long staff. He turned around and hit the NPC's head with the staff. The nameless NPC ran fast, so the force of his impact was also great. Wang Yu used her staff to block the NPC's attack and immediately felt a huge force pushing against her. In the blink of an eye, Wang Yu used the force to press down and leaped across the street, flying to a higher rooftop on the opposite side. There was a limit to how high the guards could jump. After Wang Yu flew across the street, the guards jumped down and followed the NPC on the ground. The only ones chasing behind Wang Yu were the few NPCs with question marks. F***CK, they can jump so high. Seeing the NPCs behind him, Wang Yu wanted to cry. Among the players, only Grandmasters of Combat had such high jumping power. He did not know what these NPCs were doing. How could they jump so high? The system was too unreasonable. Where's the tallest building in the main city? If you see me, please answer. Wang Yu asked for help. Priest church, priest church. That's all. Wuji replied immediately. The others did not refute. Apart from some special main cities, the priest church was indeed the tallest building in every regular main city. They lived by the gods, after all. Naturally, they wanted to be closer to them. T. I'm on the roof of the church now. Are there any higher ones? Wang Yu looked at the building under his feet and replied casually. At this time, Yang Na said, Oldie told me to tell everyone that Wuji should go die. The Mage Academy's elemental tower is the tallest building in the main city. Right, the elemental tower is the tallest. Wuji, who do you think you are? You only know how to fish in troubled waters. Hearing Yang Na's words, everyone remembered that regular main cities did indeed have such a building. The elemental tower was built by mages to absorb the elements between heaven and earth. The higher it was built, the easier it was to meditate. Mages did not lack money, so they naturally built the elemental tower as high as possible. However, this place was off limits to unauthorized personnel, so no one thought of it for a while. Got it. As Wang Yu spoke, he had already passed the church area and arrived at the Mage Academy. As expected, in the center of the Mage Academy, on the hexagram formation, stood a tall tower that reached the clouds. Without a word, Wang Yu jumped up and pounced on it. However, the NPCs and guards behind him stopped when they reached the boundary of the Mage Academy, not daring to take even half a step forward. Wang Yu was so focused on escaping that he did not pay attention to the situation behind him. He only minded his own business and climbed to the top of the tower. F***CK. Does this kid have insider information? Seeing that Wang Yu did not hesitate in the slightest and jumped from the city wall to the top of the elemental tower, the monitoring team could not help but exclaim, Meow. Although there were countless bosses and monsters in this instance dungeon, the final boss, the god's puppet, was at the top of the elemental tower. Of course, this was not the most important thing. The most important thing was that the god's puppet had planted seeds in the puppets of the Atlan city. With each death of an NPC or guard, the god's puppet would become stronger. All the items and equipment dropped in this instance dungeon would be left behind if the challenge failed. The designers had set the drop rate of these NPCs to be extremely high to set a trap for the players. However, now that Wang Yu had only killed an insignificant NPC and was heading straight for the elemental tower, all the game workers present could not help but feel a wave of panic. The attributes of the unawakened god's puppet were only 1/10 of its full state. Wang Yu jumped to the top of the tower so decisively. They could not help but feel that someone had leaked the strategy. Chapter 602. Leaking the strategy was a big deal. For a game like Rebirth that had a huge influence both at home and abroad, every worker in the game company had to sign a confidentiality agreement. The disclosure of every detail in the game was unfair to all the players in the world. Once there was a leak, one would have to bear the corresponding legal responsibility. For a high-end hidden dungeon like the Atlantis, not to mention ordinary workers, even 9,527 would not be able to bear the responsibility. Thinking of this, the game workers in the monitoring room looked at each other, and a chill ran down their spines. 9527 said, "Don't let your imagination run wild. He definitely doesn't have a strategy." "How do you know?" everyone asked, puzzled. King skipped the small monsters and went to fight the final boss. How could this be called not having a strategy. If this scene was released, people would be suspicious. This person asked us for clues about Atlan. If he had a strategy, wouldn't this be an unnecessary move to deliberately make us suspicious? 9527 explained. Maybe he's deliberately provoking us? This kid's attitude isn't very honest. Besides, he's been reported as a cheat by so many people. How could he be a quiet guy? As they spoke, Wang Yu's face of refusing to admit it and saying that he knew Kung Fu appeared in everyone's mind again. Now that they thought about it, his inner face was too treacherous. Is there a need for this? 9527 really could not figure out the purpose of Wang Yu's doing this. It was like a criminal coming to the police station to show off. This was obviously a matter of intelligence. Then how do you explain him going straight to the tower now? This was the question that everyone was most concerned about at the moment. The truth was not important. What was important was to be able to give an explanation. Otherwise, everyone in the monitoring team would be in trouble because they were the ones who gave the clue to Atlan. At the end of the day, they had to find their way here. 9527 was stunned for a moment and said, "How the F***CK would I know? Why don't you guys make up a... Oh no, think of one." Everyone in the monitoring team was speechless. If they could think of one, who would still be here talking nonsense? At this moment, little Zhang suddenly said, "He was forced to do this." "What do you mean?" 9527 asked with a puzzled look. "Do you see who's behind him?" Little Zhang asked, pointing to the screen. Great Magister Regis. 9527 had designed the Atlan dungeon, so it naturally recognized the strongest hidden boss in it. Yeah, being chased by such a big boss, there's no way he can turn back. "Look at his feet," little Zhang said as he pointed at the NPCs on the street. When everyone saw this, they immediately understood. At this time, Wang Yu was being chased by the big boss, and with so many NPCs below him, Wang Yu could only jump to higher ground. He was clearly being chased by monsters. If it had been a normal dungeon, everyone would have pushed their way through the city gates, killing all the gods in their way. Such a thing would never have happened. With Wang Yu's current level, he definitely wouldn't be able to defeat so many monsters. If he couldn't beat them, he could only escape. His actions this time were purely coincidental. No wonder. You scare me to death. After coming to their senses, everyone broke out in a cold sweat. Wang Yu's climbing of the tower almost scared their souls out of their bodies. Atlan was a city that had developed technology and magic to the extreme. Although countless years had passed, the standard of this city was still at the top of the continent. As the tallest building in a regular main city, the Elemental Tower was naturally much taller than other cities. Of course, now that Atlan City had sunk to the bottom of the sea, no matter how tall the Elemental Tower was, it was useless. Wang Yu climbed up on both hands and feet for several minutes. His lightness skill was almost depleted before he reached the top. At the top of the Elemental Tower was a circular platform surrounded by various elemental magic arrays. Now that the colorful magical light had been lost, Wang Yu could only recognize them from the symbols. At the very center of the platform, a burly NPC dressed like a knight knelt on one knee. In his left hand was a white cross-shaped lance, while in his right hand was a holy, cross-shaped longsword. His appearance was extremely majestic. However, the two wings on his back drooped weakly on the ground, making him look somewhat dispirited. It's the boss. The moment Wang Yu saw the knight, he immediately realized that he had accidentally barged into the lair of the boss. Moreover, from the appearance, this boss was definitely not easy to deal with. Although Wang Yu had not seen many NPCs with wings, none of the bosses he had seen were easy to deal with. Whether it was the Inquisitor, the Dragonblood Spear God, or even the weakest Eagle Ape King, Wang Yu had suffered quite a bit. It could fly, regardless of whether he could defeat it or not. If he really could not, he could just fly into the sky and stand in an invincible position. Wang Yu originally only wanted to enter the city and see if he could get some loot out of it. He had not thought about fighting the boss. After seeing the knight, Wang Yu was slightly shocked and turned to leave. However, seeing that the knight had no intention of moving, Wang Yu could not resist his curiosity and cast a detect spell on the knight. God's puppet Wilburst LV60, Dark Old Boss, Puppet, Repairing 10%, HP, 5000000 MP, 5000000 Skills, Destructive Impact, Stigmata Cross Slash, Holy Flash, Holy Body Talents, Puppet Power. Absorbs the power of puppets to repair its own strength system. Current repair 10% background introduction. God represents the highest ideology in the world. When God learned that someone was challenging his authority, he specially sent Archangel Wilburst in the form of a puppet to cleanse all the sins in the world and suppress them for eternity. God's puppet, it's the final boss. Seeing the introduction of the night not far in front of him, Wang Yu was instantly excited. The space above the elemental tower was not big. As a final boss hiding place, it was indeed a little shabby. Wang Yu never thought that the final boss would hide in such a place. However, after thinking about it, it made sense. Even the church's group of psychics lived so high up. How could someone who had really seen God live so low? The only thing that puzzled Wang Yu was that there were no stairs in the elemental tower. Wang Yu climbed up with Qinggong. If it were other players, they would not be able to climb up, right? What they did not know was that the power of the god's puppet was not yet complete. In the original setting of the dungeon, the god's puppet's power would recover as players killed NPCs. When it recovered to a certain extent, the god's puppet would descend from the sky and kill all the innocent players in the name of God. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.